Izuku Midoriya, a young boy born without a quirk in a world where everyone has one, dreams of becoming a hero. But what if he wasn't quirkless? What if he had the power to control nuclear energy?
Izuku felt a bone-deep emotional exhaustion as he walked towards UA for his third day of school, together with his female kidnapper. At least it wasn't the physical or mental type, his quirk took care of those. Spending the night in a foreign place where it seemed like everything was trying to kill you, getting tested for every possible data point by a manic, sleep-deprived support student along the way would do that to you. He honestly had no idea how Mom could go from fretting over him when he encountered some two-bit sludge villain that he and Koch-chan easily fought off, to approving a sleepover at what was basically a stranger's house with no hesitation. At least she gave some reasoning over the phone while he was being dragged off. "Oh baby, I'm so glad to see you getting more friends besides Katsuki. Tell me all about it when you come back home tomorrow." I can't believe I snapped at Mate-chan though. That was a really stupid move on my part. Wait, hold on, why is my vision going wobbly? And where's that heart coming from? Is someone using a quirk on me? What's a penny? Izuku cautiously followed Hatsume as they approached what looked like a garage door, the sun setting behind the hills. At least she had stopped dragging him along once he had no idea where he was anymore. He thought they were somewhere in the outskirts of Kurosato City, made evident by the proximity of wooded areas and the apartment blocks nearby, which somehow looked even less appealing than the one he and his mom moved into after the kidnapping debacle. It was honestly difficult to picture the pristine behemoth of UA's main towers being located in the same city as this part, let alone so close. Izuku warily eyed the building they were now standing in front of, and noticed a lack of any sign of life inside. Mei-san. She turned around and smiled. "Yes, Zero-Pointer-kun. If you're worried about the building's integrity, this place is built for testing babies like mine. So don't worry." Whether that was meant to be reassuring or not, Izuku didn't know. "No, not about that. I just noticed a lack of adults," he elaborated hesitantly. She waved his concern away and turned around to start fiddling with the door's lock. "Don't worry about that. Dad's busy doing whatever back at home." Izuku blinked in surprise at the admission. "This isn't your house." Hatsume's dreadlocks shifted over her shoulders as she shook her head. "Not everyone lives in the same city as UA, Zero-Pointer-kun. I'm just lucky my dad had one of his old workshops here in Kurosato, cause those apartments over there definitely wouldn't survive my babies." She snickered. She finally got the garage door unlocked and rolled it up, the loud noise breaking off any further questions. "No time for pleasantries though, we have a lot of testing to do with your quirk, Zero-Pointer-kun." As Izuku was herded in by Hatsume, a lone wonder, a scared but resigned look on their face, walked past towards the nearby apartments, while whispering what sounded like, "Oh god, it's gonna be one of those nights, isn't it?" Before the garage door slammed back down behind Izuku, casting the space into complete darkness. Izuku carefully followed Hatsume in the dark as she expertly navigated through what appeared to be a large storage space, before entering a more open space and flicking on the lights. At first impression, the lit-up room looked like a downsized, messier version of the studio at UA, with several emptied cups that smelled like extra strong coffee standing on a desk. Before Izuku could familiarize himself more with the room, Hatsume walked to the middle and opened her arms. "Welcome to Mikasa, Zero-Pointer-kun. This is where the magic happens when I'm not at UA." She abruptly started walking to a nearby chair with a white jumpsuit draped over it, and threw it at him. "Go change into that, Zero-Pointer-kun. It'll record all that juicy data I need." Izuku stared at the suit in confusion. What is this exactly?" Hatsume's smile stayed bright. "That's the prototype of your hero costume. Why are you looking at me like that? How could you assign something like this, and not expect me to make it myself as well?" Luckily there was a separate kitchen, so Izuku reluctantly complied and put the jumpsuit on before entering the main space, where Hatsume instantly sprung on him again. "Nice and fast, Zero-Pointer-kun. That's exactly why you're already my favorite lab partner." Wait, she was serious about that? I didn't even agree. She moved uncomfortably close to him again and pointed behind his shoulder. "Do you see that computer screen over there?" He looked over his shoulder, finding nothing of note. "No, what do you Izuku promptly looked back to see Hatsume pricking his thumb with a needle. "What are you doing?" Hatsume looked up as some of the blood trickled into a small vial. "Distracting you, obviously." "Seriously, I just have to gather this blood for later research. Being able to contain and maintain something super hot like helium plasma has gotta be something I could use for some of my babies." She then put the vial away and grabbed what looked like an actual revolver from a cabinet, and aimed at him with her tongue sticking out in concentration. "Now stand still, Zero-Pointer-kun." Wait, hold up. What are you doing?" Izuku shielded his face with his arms in a panic. Hatsume lowered the gun with an incredulous look on her face. "I'll tell you when you stop being a hard target to hit, of course. I want to see if that electromagnetic field of yours can be used for stuff besides your plasma." Izuku hesitantly lowered his guard. "You want to see if I can stop a bullet? You catch on quick, Zero-Pointer-kun. Now let me aim again." The gun instantly came back up. Izuku's arms instantly came back up as well. I don't even get any protection in case it doesn't work. Hatsume looked at him like he was the 5-star rating Sudoku in the weekly newspaper, before coming to a realization and slapping her own forehead. Oh right, the bulletproof vest. She snickered. I kinda forgot not everyone is used to my way of doing things. It's like my mother used to say. Setting up fail-safes means less time for testing your babies. I'm 99% sure you don't need it if you're wearing that baby I made, but if it lets you sleep at night. I don't sleep, Mei-san. In the end, the bulletproof vest wasn't necessary. Izuku's field, magnified by the circuits in the prototype jumpsuit, easily stopped the revolver bullets as well as several throwing knives and shurikens. He also coincidentally remembered he could reverse the polarity of his field after he got stuck holding onto a metal support beam on the ceiling, after Hatsume had gleefully taken out a shotgun for further testing. Hatsume, trying and failing to unstick him from the beam while promising she'd skip the shotgun test for today, felt weirdly nostalgic for some reason, but it was quickly forgotten when he finally remembered how to reverse the polarity again, and got repelled downwards from the beam, crashing onto the floor with Hatsume acting as a human cushion. And that's how the next few hours went, with Hatsume showing no signs of letting up whatsoever. She apparently had a lot of self-made support equipment she wanted Izuku to test out, checking for compatibility, and slowly, bit by bit, his patience was worn down. By the time she wanted to check his plasma's temperature for the second time, you should always double-check your results. 0-pointer Izuku decided to put a stop to the barrage of tests. Mei-san, and with temperatures like these you could. It's almost 1 AM and totally be a plasma cutter if you. I still need to do my homework. Shape your plasma like a knife. And, Mei-san, are you even listening to me? I'm calling dibs on your plasma cutter for lab work by the way, so. Danger Hatsume, can you slow down for a second and freaking listen to me? Hatsume definitely heard that as her eyes went wide and she stopped trembling. Holy crap, well that finally seemed to do it. If she's like this with her previous lab partners, I can see why they'd bail after a month. I didn't even agree to being her lab partner in the first place anyway, she just assumed that. Does she even realize what a nuisance that can be for people? Izuku was snapped out of his thoughts when he heard the sound of a latch opening, followed by a thud. He looked around and saw that Hatsume had left her previous spot, now facing away from him, with one of those ceiling trapdoors with extendable ladders opened in front of her. She spoke up in an uncharacteristically quiet voice as she climbed the rungs. Your stuff is in the kitchen. Sorry for being a nuisance and assuming I'll see you in the support studio, Midoriya-kun. Izuku's thoughts came crashing back in as the loft hatch closed back up. Was I mumbling my thoughts again? Crap, she must have heard all of it then. Would I do that? Would I even think that mom didn't raise me to act like this? The weight started pressing down on his shoulders as he looked at the hatch Hatsume had climbed through. I have to apologize to her. Izuku made up his mind and changed back into his regular clothes before walking to the loft hatch, which luckily wasn't locked up. He gently lowered the ladder onto the ground and climbed up. Reaching the top of the ladder, Izuku peeked over the side and took stock of the room. What was apparently the attic of the workshop turned out to be converted into a decently sized bedroom. The left wall had several short bookcases, filled with science and engineering textbooks. A queen-size bed sat adjacent to the right wall, underneath a large poster of the periodic table and an attic window, which was open and filling the room with a cold breeze. The floor was covered by several blueprints and articles of clothing strewn across. At the back wall, a large shelf held 11 separate trophies for a Kimto Science Expo contest, accompanied with several picture frames. The large wooden desk stood next to the shelf. Hatsume was sitting at said desk on a tall stool, her feet not touching the ground, while she quietly tinkered with something with a screwdriver. Izuku slowly approached her, walking carefully as to avoid stepping on any blueprints, and spoke up softly to avoid startling her. Mei-san. Her flinching made it quite clear she hadn't expected him to come up. I wanted to apologize for downstairs. What I said wasn't okay in any way, and it was a totally unwarranted overreaction on my part. To his surprise, he got a quiet, hesitant response. It's alright, Midoriya-kun. You don't need to stay here to apologize. It was my fault you snapped in the first place. Like I said, this has happened multiple times already. I'm used to it by now. I just wasn't expecting to break my old record of a week, and at UA too no less. There was a quiet sniff. Izuku wanted to retort, but Hatsume continued. My dad likes to joke about how I treat every meeting like an elevator pitch. Get everything I have to offer out there as fast as possible so I can get back to working. Says I get my drive and assertiveness from mom. Izuku didn't know how to respond to that, and started feeling awkward when the only sound for a while was that of screws being turned, so he moved to inspect the shelf with all the trophies. His gaze fell on one of the picture frames sitting on the middle shelf. It held a photograph that depicted 2 adults and a child standing on the steps next to what looked like a science center, with a rudimentary-looking drone flying above them. There was a dark blue planetarium dome standing in the background. On the right stood a tall, tanned, voluptuous woman with dark brown hair and recognizable dreadlocks, wearing a dirty jumpsuit and giving a manic smile. Her bluer eyes had a similar crosshair pattern on them. The much shorter, scrawny man to her left looked like your stereotypical Japanese salaryman, if you ignored the pink hair and bright yellow eyes, with a stern but proud look on his face. And in the middle stood what was probably a 4-year-old Hatsume, holding up one of the trophies that was now standing on the shelf with a big toothy grin, one of her teeth missing. Izuku noticed a few more similar photographs on the shelf, each one featuring an increasingly complex invention and a slightly older Hatsume. Though there were only 4 in total compared to the trophies. "Are these your parents, Mei-san?" he eventually asked quietly, breaking the silence. Izuku saw Hatsume turn her head slightly to the left to give him a quick glance. He could just about make out the red and a slight puffiness before she returned to her tinkering. From this angle it was clear she was just tightening and untightening the same screw over and over again. "The man is my dad, Hiroshi Hatsume," she answered. "He works as a freelance consultant for support companies all over Japan, like Detnerd, Yoirozu Industries and Endeavors. He's pretty good at reading blueprints and the like, since his quirk lets him perceive the font of any document in any size he wants." Izuku's eyes fell back on the picture as Hatsume continued. "The woman is my mom, Chan is Hatsume. She can lock onto any object and keep it in focus no matter what happens, with the downside of visual and mental tunnel vision. She always jumped straight into the next big thing when it came to inventing. That's probably why she immediately agreed to the engineering job at Island 8 years ago." Hatsume sighed, a tired sound that made Izuku's heart clench, as he processed the unfortunate implications of her explanation. "I haven't really heard from Mom since. She's probably been too preoccupied with all the amazing stuff she's doing over there compared to what we have at home." The tinkering sounds stop as she lays down the object and screwdriver, and puts her hands on the desk. "My plan has always been to graduate from UA, and become so famous from selling all my babies as the personal support technician of a top-ranking pro, that I'll be guaranteed to work with her again, just like back in her workshop." Something about that statement strongly resonated with something deep inside Izuku. He couldn't quite put a finger on why, and he turned away from the shelf, back to where Hatsume was sitting, and slowly approached her. She didn't seem to really notice as she turned somber again after her proclamation, her face falling and getting hidden by a curtain of dreadlocks. But now I'm not sure she'd want to. I always just chalked up the previous walkouts to us being in middle school, and them not being serious about the whole thing, and that those problems would go away once I got into UA with like-minded people. But if this is already happening now, and with someone who seems the least likely to bail, then am I the problem? Did she get fed up with me too? Is that why, Mom? Izuku decided that her thoughts weren't going to a good place, and interrupted by cautiously putting his hand on her shoulder. Her shoulders tensed up underneath his hand, but she remained completely still. "I'm so sorry that I made you think that I'd leave you behind, Mei-chan," he confessed with a wobbly voice. Apparently he was more affected by what she'd said than he thought. He gently pulled her into a sideways hug. "You shouldn't have needed to get used to people bailing on you in the first place. I can't speak for your previous partners, or your mom. And I won't lie, you did overwhelm me. But that doesn't excuse me acting out the way I did, especially since you were just really excited to help me out, and assumed I was just as excited, which I am. I'm grateful for what you want to do for me, and how motivated you are for that." He tightened his arms when he felt Mei-chan's body starting to tremble. Izuku turned on his aura, making sure it spread to Mei-chan's body. "I said I hadn't even agreed to it in the first place, so I should say this now to make it clear. I'd love to be your lab partner for the next 3 years, Mei-chan." That declaration finally did it, as the trembling and stiff posture disappeared and she melted into his hug, reciprocating it. For the next minute or so he just stood still as quiet sobs stained his shirt, quietly rubbing her back. After a little while the muffled sounds died down and she sat up straight, a wobbly smile on her face. "I'll try to be more mindful in the future, Midoriya-kun. Just promise to help me out if I do it again." Izuku returned a soft smile as his shoulders lightened of an imaginary weight. "I promise, Mei-chan. I look forward to working with you." His eyes fell on a peculiar object standing in the corner behind her, and decided to move on to another subject. "Hold on, is it a jetpack based off of the Buster Hero? Airjet?" Mei-chan looked at it over her shoulder and gained an excited smile. "It is. Your hero knowledge is impeccable, 0-pointer-kun. I made it myself after meeting Airjet in person." That observation led to a long ramble about famous hero support equipment. Eventually, sleep seemed to catch up with Mei-chan as it turned 2 a.m., and Izuku quickly went back down to the workshop to do the homework he had to catch up on while she dozed off. By the time the sun rose, Izuku had already finished up and was meditating like he normally did to pass the rest of the night. At some point he heard a door open, and several minutes later the sounds of tinkering filled the workshop again, a soft smile gracing his face at the sound. It stayed like that until they eventually had to leave for UA, ending the sleepover. Though, the wobbly vision and harp sounds suddenly stopped. Maybe it was just my imagination then. Izuku was snapped out of his thoughts as he noticed a commotion at the UA entrance gate. A crowd of what appeared to be reporters harassing other students a short distance away from where he and Mei-chan were walking. Koch-chan, who probably traveled to UA alone this time, appeared to be one of the unlucky victims. "Fuck off, you damn leeches. We haven't even had any lessons with All Might yet. And even if we did, I ain't telling you shit. Now get out of my way before I make you. The Koch-chan branded growl accompanied that threat, and several pops went off around his hands. The press seemed to get the message and formed a path for him, but one of them changed their mind as Koch-chan finally crossed the gate. Hey, wait a minute. Both the reporter and Izuku's vision of Koch-chan abruptly cut off as several metal plates rose up from the gate, completely blocking off the entrance from the reporter with a loud clang. Izuku probably was as shocked as the reporter and took a few steps away from the crowd. Mei-chan noticed Izuku's shock and briefed him in. That's the famous UA barrier, zero-pointer kun. It's completely impenetrable against most quirks, and can even detect unauthorized biological signatures throughout the entire grounds. I've never seen it in action before, so this is an amazing opportunity. From the events earlier that day, it was obvious that Mei-chan did remember Izuku's name, but she seemed to prefer zero-pointer kun, and Izuku didn't actually mind that much, not after the original confusion of being overwhelmed left him. As for Izuku, he hadn't even really noticed that he switched from Mei-san to Mei-chan until sometime in the morning. Mei-chan, how long is that barrier going to stay up? We still need to get to our respective classes in time. She hummed and opened her notepad to start scribbling, probably observations on the barrier, as she answered his question. Scanning any UA-affiliated badge or card brings the barrier back down, apparently. Otherwise it'll take a good 15 minutes before it resets. Izuku gave an exasperated sigh as Mei-chan put her notepad back to wherever it came from. Danjit, I don't have 15 minutes. And Aizawa-sensei already told us not to come late anymore. If I get anywhere near those reporters, they're no doubt gonna recognize me as the other student from that sludge villain attack and crowd me as well. He sank down onto the ground with a groan. Mei-chan gave a half-hearted shrug and took a small device from her bag, along with a screwdriver, and started tinkering with it. Powerloader-sensei isn't that strict. I have time, so I'll just continue tinkering with my baby out here for now. Izuku looked at her open bag and got an idea. Hey, Mei-chan, how about we use this as an opportunity to field test that new one of yours? Mei-chan abruptly shot a look at Izuku after hearing the words field test, and glanced at her bag, before her eyes gained a sheen of excitement. Ah, of course, zero-pointer kun, excellent idea. I knew you'd make for an awesome lab partner. She started fishing through the bag with her tongue sticking out in concentration, before she finally seemed to hit something. Aha, here they are. She dropped her bag on the sidewalk and handed over the pair of newborn babies. Yesterday, when Mei-chan said she could whip Izuku's suggestion up in a jiffy, she really hadn't been lying. Izuku leaned down and excitedly clasped them around his high tops. What Mei-chan had made earlier in the morning while he was meditating were 2 iron soles that could be secured around his signature supernova footwear. His favorite brand of red high tops were called Supernova. Sue him, he was a space geek with the soles, leaving a layer of air directly underneath his shoes for plasma to generate from. The bottoms were decorated with small circular vents that would help direct the air currents generated by the plasma into a downward direction. Apparently the whole mechanism was inspired by an old retired hero called Gran Torino. There were also several intake vents on the sides of the iron soles to allow for more air to seep in and prolong the duration of the air currents. It all was quite nifty for something that was created in only an hour or two. Once he was sure that the soles were secured properly, he got into a crouching position facing the wall and called back. You getting on here, Mei-chan? She apparently had been paying more attention to her scribbling, as her reply was a bit delayed. Huh. Did you say something, zero-pointer kun? Go ahead and do your thingy. I'm ready to note down the results. The scribbling sounds continued. You didn't think I'd just go off on my own and make you wait for the barrier to drop, right? My back is strong enough to carry you if that's what you're worried about, Mei-chan. You'll get much better data if you experience the acceleration up close. Yeah, that makes sense. Izuku oofed under his breath as Mei-chan suddenly mounted his back, her self-made goggles already covering her eyes. Onwards and upwards, zero-pointer kun. Izuku smiled at her probably unintentional antics, and secured his grip on her as the energy for his solar wind pulled in his feet. Wait, is the usage of unlicensed support equipment illegal? Oh well, using my quirk outdoors and making support equipment without a license is as well. No time for second thoughts. And with that last thought, Izuku blasted into the air as he pushed the energy through the soles of his feet, rocketing up way higher than the actual wall, as the directed blasts of wind propelled him off the ground at high speeds. When he reached the apex of the jump, Izuku looked back down at the gate, which was now a good distance behind and below him, and saw Aizawa-sensei trudging towards the barrier, looking back at him with a disapproving stare before shrugging and resuming his journey. Izuku could barely hear Mei-chan's excited cackling above the sound of the wind, and readied another, much less powerful blast of wind in his feet to land as safely as possible. Once they landed, Mei-chan hopped off and immediately started scribbling again in a frenzy. That was awesome. My goggles got so much data. We should do more field tests like that in the future, zero-pointer kun. As long as you tell me beforehand, Mei-chan. Izuku brought up. She nodded absent-mindedly as she finished scribbling, and put her goggles back up on her forehead, as they went their separate ways for the morning. That jump might have been a bit scary, but at least he was still gonna be on time. Danjit, he was definitely not gonna be in class on time. Izuku had actually made it to the classroom before Aizawa-sensei, i.e. on time, but Iida quickly pointed out that he was still wearing unauthorized support equipment outside of hero classes, and that he should return them to his assigned support studio immediately. So that's why Izuku found himself sprinting across UA's main building to the support department tower, tossing the iron souls across the 1H studio, and almost hitting a girl with grayish-purple hair in the hat. Upon reaching it, oh crap, sorry, gotta go, before sprinting all the way back to the 1A classroom. As Izuku opened the door, he realized he was definitely late. Everyone else was already sitting at their desks, and Aizawa-sensei had fallen asleep in the corner, which meant he had finished the announcements for homeroom. Iida was, surprisingly, standing at the teacher's podium at the front of the classroom when Izuku had opened the door and looked at him. "Midoriya-san, there you are. I'll brief you over the announcements you missed. Don't worry, I told Aizawa-sensei why you were running late." Iida motioned towards the class and continued. "We need to choose class representatives, and the ones that have been nominated by our class are going to give speeches before voting. I was actually about to start first, so you have perfect timing, Midoriya-san." Izuku sighed in relief and sat back down at his desk, as Iida started talking about the sanctity of this position and proper reinforcement of the rules. Koch-chan tilted his chair back and looked at Izuku with his head upside down. "Damn it, nerd, you missed the whole nomination stuff. Was gonna nominate you, but you weren't here." Despite his personality, Koch-chan was pretty self-aware of how he didn't work well with most people, and never tried running for class representative back in middle school. Simply shrugging, Izuku responded with indifference. I guess I would have tried if you nominated me, since it's an important position and all, but I don't really think I'm cut out for it, so I don't mind." By that time, Iida was being pushed away from the podium by the pink-skinned girl, who promptly spoke up afterwards. "Hey guys. I guess none of us have had proper introductions yet, so my name's Mina Ashido, but I prefer Mina. My quirk is called Acid, and I love breakdancing and gossip. If you choose me, I promise I'll put the fun back into the classroom." The red spiky-haired teen gave an encouraging thumbs up. Iida, who had begrudgingly sat back in his seat and was pocketing his speech cards, raised his arm. "Ashido-san, what are your planned policies for interclass relationships?" It turned out Ashido hadn't prepared much beyond her basic introduction, and tried to make things up from the spot. Now, nobody except Iida actually expected anyone to have anything beyond a basic introduction ready, but the policies that came from her improvising highlighted to the class that she might be a bit too easygoing to put in charge. Everyone asked Iida to keep his in-depth questions to himself afterwards though. Next up, the only other brunette in the class besides Izuku came up to the podium. "Hello guys, my name is Tsuyu Ase, but call me Tsuyu-chan please, Rupert." The monotone delivery as well as her emotionless face made that seem more like an order than a request, but she moved on. "My quirk is called Frog and lets me do anything a frog can do. I have 2 younger siblings, and since my parents work away from home most of the time, I've been their caretaker for most of my life. I think the skills I've acquired will make me a decent class representative, Rupert." The class breathed a sigh of relief from the first reasonable speech, and Asui moved back to her desk. Next up, the stoic teen, who seemed to like browsing on his phone when a teacher wasn't talking, walked up to the podium and gave an indifferent stare. "I'm Shitot Odoroki, my quirk is half cold half hot. I'm only doing this so my father won't tell me I should have given it a try at dinner tonight, so I don't care if you vote for me or not." And with that cryptic speech, Todoroki left the podium as quickly as he had gotten onto it, leaving all his classmates in confusion. The first to get shaken out of their stupor was Yoirozu, who seemed familiar with Todoroki. She walked up to the podium next, and started speaking in a very proper tone. "Hello everyone, my name is Momo Yoirozu, it's a pleasure to meet all of you. My quirk is called Creation, but I'll leave the explanation for another time. As the heir of Yoirozu Industries, I have received many lessons in time management and policy creation in the past, by my parents and private tutors. I decided that I wanted to become a hero instead, so I hope that those lessons will still prove useful as your class representative." The rest of the class gave an appreciative nod at a quick and proper speech. Lastly, a purple-haired Izuku took a double take at that. "Huh. Has that guy been in this class the entire time?" Anyway, the guy of unfortunate stature walked to the podium and climbed up on the desk in front of him. "Hey ladies, my name's Minoru Mineta, and when I become class representative, I'll change the dress code, so all of us can enjoy more." Alright, that's enough. Everyone looked to see Aizawa-sensei had risen from his comfy, yellow tomb. "Your logical speeches have taken up enough time already. Vote for your rep and vice rep before homeroom ends, or I'll pick 2 random students for you. And no, I won't change it later for your convenience." A quick vote was held in the final minutes of homeroom, under the threat of Aizawa-sensei's constant glare, and Iida was voted in as class rep, with Yoirozu chosen as vice representative. Ashido, Todoroki and Mineta had gotten 0 votes with their speeches, while Asui had gotten only 4 votes, since most of the class didn't want to add even more to her workload. Aizawa-sensei stared at the tally marks on the board and nodded. "Good job, class. These 2 are your rep and vice rep from now on. Don't make me regret it." And with that ominous statement, the bell rang and President Mick barged in for English. It was later that same day during lunch break that the Izuku, Kaminari-kan had coined the term the day before during the sparring, since Akinda sounded like Izuku. Koch-chan and Chieko-chan happily joined in to tease him, and Mei-chan didn't pay much attention to it, but didn't object either, found themselves eating their lunch at the entrance hall, trying to figure out those pesky UA floorplans once and for all. Hey guys, what if these are actually depicting a secret tunnel network? Izuku proposed. Chako-chan took a second look at the plans. Maybe, Midori-kun. If that's the case, then the unoccupied spaces should be the rooms like this one, right? Mei-chan was absent-mindedly scanning the plans with her zoom quirk, while fiddling with some knobs on the device she'd been tinkering with the entire morning. If we go with that logic, there would be an entrance somewhere here. Maybe there's a pressable button that'll open up a secret entrance. Kaminari-kan looked up from his bento and started talking with his mouth full. Let's find it, dudes. I'd be totally vindicated from the first day if that's true. Before any searching could happen, all the lights suddenly went out, which was quickly followed by screaming and a horde of students starting to run around. If Izuku and the others hadn't been standing near the entrance, they would have probably been trampled already. Izuku looked back at the floorplan and had a worrying realization. Guys, if we had so much trouble finding our way in those hallways when all the lights were on, then who knows how many people could get injured in the dark. To make matters worse, Koch-chan came running back in from the outside, where he had been loitering. Zukum, what the fuck is going on? The press just started walking past the gate, and the barrier ain't doing shit. And now they're running towards us like feral animals. Oh crap, none of the staff are here yet, and if that mob of reporters starts coming in, it's gonna make everything even worse. Think of a plan, Izuku. I need to somehow get both the students and reporters to stop moving, get the attention of all the nearby students, and show them the right way to the exit. Izuku looked at his friends, and after a few seconds of contemplation he spoke up as realization hit him. I got it, guys. Mei-chan, she looked up from her tinkering. Do you have anything that can power up and make use of one of those intercom speakers? Her eyes lit up and she held the thing she'd been tinkering with in front of her. Of course, 0-pointer-kun, I just need to get close to one. Izuku nodded in understanding and continued. The whole group was staring at him now. Kaminari-kun, can you spread out a low enough charge to temporarily stun people in a relatively large area? He looked unsure but gave a thumbs up. Yeah, alright, I'll totally give it a shot. Izuku grinned. Alright, here's the plan then. Chieko-chan, make Mei-chan float with a quirk and throw her towards the nearest intercom. She complied, and after a few seconds of nudging things around, Mei-chan confirmed that she connected whatever her device was, tossing what was probably a speaker to Izuku, who promptly passed it on to Koch-chan and moved to the main doors. Alright, Kaminari-kun, when I say go you try and stun as many people as possible. Izuku then looked out towards the entrance gate, and waited until the mass of reporters had come close enough to the doors. He gulped as the stampede came closer and closer, and eventually they came close enough. Go. Kaminari-kun's AoE stun worked perfectly, as the front lines of reporters suddenly halted their charge, and caused the rest of the mob to stop as well. All the visible students in sight also abruptly halted their panicked running. In that exact moment, Izuku closed his eyes and spread out a solar storm throughout the nearby area, thin strands of plasma flowing away from him and traveling across the ceiling, branching through all the nearby halls that he had memorized from the previous lunches, and creating trails that also illuminated the halls. He also made a thicker trail that cordoned off the press from a decently sized area around the entrance, though it was difficult to turn the trails in a usable form, with the limitations of his field. Finally he sat down in a lotus position and nodded at Koch-chan, who put the speaker up to his mouth. Alright you chucklefix, there are no villains attacking, so calm the fuck down already. Just follow the stupid damn light trails above you to the entrance before you trample someone to death. No cutting ahead. For the next 5 minutes, Izuku sat next to the entrance in his meditative state, trying to keep his solar storm up, and hoping he wouldn't push his heart too far before everyone was out. Eventually all the students drained out through the main doors, and their section of the school had emptied out. When he thought his heart was about to start aching really badly, he got lightly smacked on the head several times, and he opened his eyes to see Koch-chan standing over him with a proud look in his eyes. Damn Zuku, that's gotta be a new record for you. Everyone is outside now, so drop it. Mei-chan was standing next to Koch-chan, fiddling with what apparently was an intercom hijacker as Izuku finally dropped his quirk. That was awesome, 0-pointer-kun, like a well-oiled machine. Her face tensed slightly. I really think you should take me up on that bionic heart idea though, I could hear you squirming from over here. Before Izuku could ease her worries, he saw Aizawa-sensei and Present Mick coming inside through the main entrance, heading for him. Aizawa-sensei halted and gave him an undecipherable look for several seconds. Problem child Izuku was already bracing himself for a scolding for his reckless move when good job. From what I saw, you handled that quickly and efficiently. The press has been dealt with and most students were successfully evacuated. If I read your full file correctly however, then you shouldn't use something as harmful like that next time though. Izuku was even further surprised when his hair was patted once. Koch-chan spoke up before he could voice any confusion however. 8. Hobo-sensei present mix snickered in the background, but Aizawa-sensei didn't seem to react to it. What the fuck was that all about? Aizawa-sensei pinched his nose. How is the bridge of his nose not red from irritation by now? But answered anyway. Today, Powerloader would be rebooting all the coffee machines to finally fix them once and for all, but for some godforsaken reason they were attached to the main power and security grids, so the entire thing started rebooting instead. Right as he finished saying that, all the lights suddenly turned back on. HMPF, and there you have it. Everyone except the press can start moving back in now. Damn vultures. At least all the coffee machines should be fixed now, he muttered. Go see recovery girl just in case your heart was actually damaged, problem child. Izuku nodded and stood up, wobbling as he tried to walk away from the wall, but Koch-chan came up to support him. Oh, one last thing. We're canceling the other lessons, but we're having a quick homeroom to clarify the situation to the rest of the class, and to go over some evacuation protocols, since clearly some of you didn't actually read the booklets. A disappointed stare swept over the group of friends. Aizawa-sensei then walked to the nearest coffee machine and sighed in relief when the thing started pouring a cup for him. There's a god after all. After a quick checkup with recovery girl, your heart seems fine, dearie, but don't try something like that again anytime soon. Izuku and Koch-chan found themselves back in the classroom, where the class had apparently been discussing something with Iida and Yurirozu. Iida turned around at their arrival. Ah, Midoriya-san, it's good to see you again. The subject of our conversation was about you, actually. Izuku startled but recomposed himself. Is it something I need to know, Iida-san? The class rep nodded. Yes, actually, I was waiting for you to arrive to make an announcement as class rep. Iida waited for Izuku to sit back down before continuing. As we were talking about just now, I'm sure we all heard about what Midoriya-san did during that blackout. His quick decisive intervention most likely prevented several injuries. Iida then hung his head in shame. I'm ashamed to admit that I did not help with the situation as I was quite panicked myself. Which is why I'm now asking Midoriya-san for permission to hold a second vote. I do not wish to be class representative if a better candidate wasn't chosen simply because they weren't around to get nominated. Izuku's eyes widened in disbelief. Wait, hold on, Iida-san. Didn't you really want this position? He shouted. Iida shook his head. Wanting a position and being suitable for it are two different things, Midoriya-san, and you are clearly a much more suitable leader than me. It was pure luck that I was standing at the entrance, and I couldn't have even done any of that if my friends weren't around. I'm sure you would have done something like that as well if you had been in my place. Izuku objected. Yeah, but you were the one that actually came up with all of it, Midori-kun, and so quickly too. We just followed your orders, that's all. You totally proved yourself. Chieko-chan shot back at him. But what if I don't have enough time to fulfill all my duties? Izuku spluttered. He already knew he was starting to grasp at straws at this point, and Koch-chan retorted. Damn it, Izuku, you're the one with the most free time out of all of us, thanks to that quirk of yours. Now man up. His arguments thoroughly defeated, Izuku accepted defeat. Ah, sure, Iida-san, if the rest of the class agrees with you, that is. A chorus of affirmations, with a so manly sprinkled in, arose from the class, which basically confirmed the whole thing. Izuku walked up to the podium as Iida stepped aside, and he gave a wobbly smile to the class. I don't know what to say except thank you for putting your trust in me. I'm still not sure if I'm cut out for this position, but I'll try my best for you guys. The cheers that came in response were quickly shut down by Aizawa-sensei. Enough diversions. Midoriya will be your class representative with Iida as your vice. Any objections? Izuku looked to his side and saw Iida with a content smile, contrasted by Yurirozu's poorly hidden resignation. Izuku frowned. This seems a bit unfair. Yurirozu got her votes fair and square. An idea quickly hit him, and he hastily spoke up. Wait, sensei. Can we have two vice reps? Aizawa-sensei shot back an incredulous look, but quickly gave in when he saw the determination. Fine, problem child. If that makes everyone happy, then I don't care. Just don't bring both of them to the student council meetings, or else lad is going to complain to me about favoritism again, which is hypocritical coming from him, but whatever. He then turned and addressed the whole class. You are all dismissed for today. The other classes are cancelled, so us staff can make sure the power and security grids are fully functional again. Make sure to actually read the booklets on evacuation protocols for next time. I will do a pop quiz on that someday. Oh, and this is a bit early, but tomorrow we'll be having a special foundational heroics lesson away from the main building, so pack a lunch for that. That's all, I'm going to catch up on a lot of missed coffee now. Most of the class followed Aizawa-sensei's lead and left the classroom, but Yurirozu still looked a bit bewildered. Izuku approached her. Are you okay, Yurirozu-san? Yurirozu startled, giving him a shy look. You didn't have to do that. I'm sure Iida will be enough to work with already. Izuku flashed a sheepish grin. I guess you're right about that, but that's exactly why I think that you'll be a great help during the student council meetings. Iida is probably more than happy to simply enforce the rules and events, rather than making them anyway, so your expertise will be invaluable. Besides, you did get a good amount of our classmates to vote for you, so that should count for something, right? Yaozu's eyes seemed to blur a bit from his proclamation. Call me Yamomo, please. It's what my friends call me, and I'm sure we'll have to work together a lot in the future. Izuku nodded. I'll remember that, Yamomo. We should probably make a group chat for the class, huh? Do you think Iida already has most of our classmates' numbers? Knowing him, probably. She chuckled at that, but settled back into the polite side he had seen from her before. Since the first council meeting is at the end of this week already, I think we should prepare some points of discussion beforehand. Would texting after school suffice? Izuku eventually found himself walking out of the entrance gates, his contact list longer by one more number, waving goodbye to Yamomo as she stepped into a limousine. From the corner of his eye he could also see Todoroki reluctantly stepping in quite an average-looking car with his that endeavor without his quirk active in the driver's seat. Izuku blinked, but the car was already driving off before he could fully process that. He sighed and turned around to look at the sea in the distance. Well, no time to think about that right now. Probably wasn't actually even the man himself. I'm sure Yamomo has a lot to discuss with me over text. I wonder what that special heroics lesson will be about though. Ox, Hiroshi Hatsume. Looks like a typical Japanese salaryman minus the bright hair and eye colors. Works as a freelance consultant for support companies all across Japan. Has a decently sized home in Kimto, but usually sleeps in hotels as he travels a lot for work. He uses his quirk font size to easily spot all the small text and details and blueprints as well as contracts. He's a stern, hardworking man who has a soft spot for his daughter. Candace Hatsume is a Japanese woman with Jamaican heritage. Her quirk lock-on is a mutation quirk that gives her reticles which allow her to visually and mentally lock onto any object without losing focus on it, no matter what happens. The downside is that she visually and mentally loses sight of all other objects when her quirk is active, which has bled over into her day-to-day life and personality. When she starts working on something she'll finish it no matter what, but quickly jumps to the next closest thing once she's finished. She's extremely excited about engineering inventing, and her daughter inherited her odd mannerisms related to it. She currently works as an engineer at Island, ever since she got approached by a scout at an underground robot fighting ring. In the end, Izuku didn't have much time to think about the upcoming heroics lesson. Yamomo was very enthusiastic about the upcoming council meeting, and had been reciting her own experiences as class rep in private school, to try and catch him up to what a rep usually does. Once she finished telling anecdotes and texted him that she would leave for dinner, Izuku decided to leave his bedroom and do his homework. He had made it a tradition to do his homework at the dinner table while his mom was eating. Being unable to eat wasn't an excuse to leave her alone during dinner, so he always sat down to have a conversation while she ate, which this time revolved around his second and third day at UA, and the night in between the two that he spent at Mei-chan's house workshop. Speaking of eating, the closest to eating that Izuku could get was with drinking flavored water. And yes, he did realize that wasn't eating, by definition. His quirk gave him one mercy in that aspect. He still actually needed water aside from the fusion to avoid dehydrating, so part of what he drank got absorbed by his esophagus. Small dissolved substances like sugar and other small flavorful molecules could get absorbed along with it, though the amount of those molecules that could be absorbed at a time before it'd build up and cause a gag reflex wasn't as high as he'd like it to be. Those molecules weren't used for much though, and would quickly get filtered out by his kidneys, but it was miles better than basically regurgitating actual food. Once mom had finished dinner and Izuku went back to his room, he hadn't expected Yamomo to want to continue preparing. She honestly did seem like an excitable child while she was throwing ideas around, which was in stark contrast to her polite, methodical attitude in the classroom. When she eventually texted that she was going to bed, Izuku couldn't help but sigh in relief, before trying to compile all of Yamomo's increasingly sleep-deprived texts into a comprehensible overview. By the time he was done, around 2 AM, he thought that they were probably way more prepared than necessary for an introductory meeting, and that it'd get awkward once they'd be the only ones throwing in ideas, but he appreciated Yamomo's eagerness anyway. Some of Yamomo's eagerness had definitely rubbed off on Izuku though, as instead of his usual meditating, he spent the rest of the night researching all kinds of UA policies, though partly because Aizawa-sensei had practically ordered them to go through the protocols. Finding out that you could transfer into the hero course through the sports festival was definitely an interesting discovery, and he filed it in his mind under interesting, but probably not useful facts for later, along with the knowledge that there were underground maintenance tunnels all over the UA grounds. I wonder what those could even be useful for. Maybe there's a whole city under there. Had Anjid Izuku, now's not the time for conspiracies. It's almost morning again and I can hear mom waking up. And so, Izuku had kind of forgotten about the special heroics lesson today, until Aizawa-sensei escorted them outside to a bus, fully dressed in their hero costumes. Iida was wearing a whistle around his neck and was giving Izuku an eager look, somehow excited at the prospect of ordering everyone on the bus in an orderly fashion. The odd layout seemed to throw a wrench in Iida's plan, but he managed anyway. Izuku ended up sitting between Asui and Shiko-chan in the open section of the bus, with Koch-chan and Kaminari-kun sitting on the other side. Mei-chan wasn't present since this was a hero course only lesson, but she'd probably get some clips afterwards, if there was CCTV wherever they were going. It's kinda weird that we're on the bus even though we're not leaving UA grounds. I knew it was big, but holy whoa. A lot of it is just trees from what I can tell though, so I wonder if there's anything actually out here. I don't know why we need to go this far from the main building for a lesson either. Maybe we'll be doing basic survival skills. I can definitely see Aizawa-sensei dropping us off somewhere in the woods, and then telling us to run all the way back to UA while fighting robots. I'm definitely getting a weird feeling from this. Oh, wait, it's just someone poking me in the side. The poking is on my left, so it must be Midoriya-kun. Your quirk is kind of weird, ribbit. Izuku had zoned back just in time to hear that. Thanks, Asui-san. Koch-chan snorted from across the aisle, but Asui ignored it. Call me Tsuyu-chan. Right, gotta remember that. When I saw you use it during the quirk apprehension test, I thought it was an extreme heat generating quirk, since you could turn the air into plasma. Like a more powerful endeavor. Izuku noticed two mismatched eyes glancing towards him. But later on you and Baku mentioned that you don't eat or sleep, so I'm wondering how all of that is related. Izuku came to a realization and sheepishly scratched the back of his neck. I guess I kinda forgot to introduce my quirk to the class, didn't I? Well, my quirk is called Starborn, a fitting name for a Tres Brillante quirk, and it basically isolates the hydrogen from the water I drink and fuses it together into helium to create a bunch of energy that I can store inside my body. Most of the energy is just used to keep me alive and keep the fusion going, since it's pretty energy intensive though, but everything else is me using that stored energy in different ways. Asui gave a satisfied nod, but across the aisle Kaminari-kun started panicking. Wait, you telling me I've practically been near one of those bombs that ended WW2 for the past few days? Koch-chan scowled and hit him on the head. You're thinking of nuclear fission, you goddamn moron. What's the difference? Kaminari-kun asked in confusion. Koch-chan gave an incredulous look, and Izuku chipped in to prevent another hit to Kaminari-kun's poor head. Nuclear fission is when a large atom is split into two smaller ones. It was used in the nuclear bombs of the past, though fusion has been used in conjunction with fission, for an explosive boost in the more powerful thermonuclear bombs, as well as in current-day nuclear reactors. The energy we generate from that comes from fast-moving neutrons that are generated when a radioactive atom splits up. Izuku stopped for a moment to catch his breath, and noticed that most of the bus was now paying attention to his impromptu lecture. Anyway, nuclear fusion is when two atoms combine into one larger atom, in this case hydrogen atoms. Compared to fission, there's no radioactive materials involved, and my body shields my DNA, as well as all of you from any high-energy radiation, so the danger's basically less than that of taking an X-ray scan at the doctor. Also, unlike fission reactions in power plants, if the containment failed for some reason like it did when Aizawa-sensei used erasure on me, then the worst you'll get is a bunch of hydrogen gas burped into your face. That elicited some chuckles from his classmates. From the back of the bus Izuku could see Yamomo raising her hand. Midoriya-kun, isn't fusion typically done with the hydrogen isotopes deuterium and tritium? I don't see how there are enough of those isotopes in the water you drink to facilitate fusion. Izuku's eyes widened. If it hadn't been for Mom's similar concerns and subsequent frantic search for government-funded quirk essential resource programs near the start, you wouldn't have searched for an answer online. Though that story was one he didn't remember himself, only through the childhood stories Mom sometimes told him. That's because that type of fusion is done in those artificial fusion reactors that are still being worked on, since it requires a lot less energy than if you wanted to fuse regular hydrogen atoms together. My quirk can easily bypass the energy requirement though, so it just uses regular hydrogen, which is basically what happens in the center of the sun. That's why we decided to call my quirk Starborn. Asui spoke up once everyone realized the impromptu lecture had ended. Ribbit, what kind of quirks would your parents need to have though to result in that, Midoriya-kun? Or is your quirk an anomaly? Izuku put his hand up to his chin and went into a thinking pose. Well, my mom can attract small objects towards her from decent distances, so I guess that mutated into strongly attracting hydrogen together at really small distances. It's really convenient actually, since it basically recreates the intense gravity that you'd experience at the sun's core, but at a small scale. The Specurade's name is Kirishima if I remember right. Put it in. Man, you got pretty lucky with that mutation then. I got my hardening from my mom's ability to fuse rocks with her skin. It kinda feels like a downgrade from hers, to be honest. Even if it's still strong on its own, it's not that flashy. The hardening was pretty weak too until last year, so it was nothing to write home about for most of my life. Izuku could detect the self-deprecation and retorted. How flashy your quirk is shouldn't matter in heroics, Kirishima-san. In fact, I think yours is much more suited for heroics than flashy quirks like mine, Koch-chan's, or Endeavor's. Our quirks could easily hurt nearby civilians or even kill villains, which we would have to work around. Meanwhile, your hardening is perfect for protecting civilians while hitting villains where it hurts without being too dangerous. If being flashy really matters that much to you, though, it's not the quirk that's flashy, but more how you use it. Like, if I never used the energy my quirk generates besides staying alive, you'd never say it was flashy, right? Kirishima looked at Izuku with newfound respect after that speech, but his mind had already been wandering off in the background after Kirishima mentioned his mother's quirk. Actually, speaking of your hardening getting stronger since last year, did you start doing anything differently? Kirishima raised an eyebrow, but it seemed his curiosity had been piqued. I mean, yeah, I started actually training my quirk through exposure as well as my muscles. Weight training, jogs, a diet, the whole package. Izuku suddenly got a hunch and continued. What kind of diet? You know man, basic stuff, high in proteins and vitamins and the like. Izuku's eyes widened. Ah. One more question. You said your mom's quirk lets her fuse rock to her skin, but that's kinda vague. Did she say if there were any requirements? The confused stare was fixed at him. Well, it has to be from silicate, but that's not much of a restriction, since almost all rocks are like that. And with that, Izuku's mind finally winded down as it came to a conclusion. I see. Kirishima-san, I think you should stick to that diet, or preferably one that has even more silicon in it. I think your hardening is your body drawing stored silicon atoms to the surface where it combines with oxygen to turn into silicate. So if you consume more silicon, then the hardness of the skin should increase dramatically, since there'd be more stored material to work with. The bus suddenly came to a stop as Aizawa-sensei turned around and glared at them. Problem child, what did I say to you again yesterday? He could only respond with a cheeky shrug as Aizawa-sensei gave a resigned sigh and got out of the bus. We've arrived at our destination, so get out, you hellions. Once they exited, the entire class stared in awe at the towering dome before them. Well, all but Izuku, who recognized it from last night's information dive. Holy whoa, that's the USJ. Kaminari-kun turned around and gave him a weird look. I don't know what you're thinking, Midori bro, but the bus ride definitely wasn't that long. Izuku casually intercepted Koch-chan's hand, which was about to go in for another hit, and giggled. Oh, sorry Kaminari-kun, I didn't mean Universal Studios Japan. I meant the unforeseen simulation joint. It's a giant structure made for simulating several extreme locations and situations like landslides and rainstorms indoors. If I remember right, it was designed entirely by one of UA's staff members. 13. Chico-chan turned around with an excited look. Wait, so does that mean that today's special heroics instructor might actually be? Hello students, and welcome to my Universal Simulation Joint, or USJ for short. Oh my god, it's really 13. Chico-chan squealed and was practically vibrating out of her hero costume. Izuku couldn't really help but reciprocate the feeling. Koch-chan scoffed. Figured that out of the entire class you two space nerds would freak out over a space-themed hero. Izuku pouted. But Koch-chan, isn't her quirk amazing? Black hole is practically the opposite of my quirk. Oh, have I told you about the theory of quirk antithesis? Koch-chan completed. Yeah, only about 300 fucking times, you goddamn quirk nerd. I swear to God, at this point I know more about quirk science than those suckers that take the master's degree. Aizawa-sensei glared at the class, and 13 used the temporary silence to speak up. It's good to know that some of you are well informed. As Midoriya said, my quirk is called Black Hole. I can use it to suck up practically anything, even light. Which makes it great for clearing debris. Chico-chan excitedly nodded in agreement. Then the mood suddenly changed. But it's also great at killing people. If I used it on someone, there'd be nothing left of them afterwards. She went silent for a few seconds to let the information sink in. Society likes to shove strong-looking quirks into boxes like heroic and villainous, which have been inadvertently defined by comic book artists from the 20th and early 21st centuries. But any quirk that's used for heroics could easily be used for villainy, and vice versa. Even quirks that everyone agrees upon are objectively heroic, like healing quirks, could be used to heal fellow villains, allowing for more bloodshed to occur. She raised one of her fingers. Moreover, there have been quite a few cases where a child accidentally hurt one or more people from their quirk manifesting or from a lack of control. Day 13 seemed to catch herself. But enough of these grim images. I would like to take this time to show you all how to use your quirk for rescuing and saving people. 13 gave a wide flourish, and the class applauded, the mood rocketing back up to seriously excited. Eventually, Aizawa spoke up. Enough delittling. Let's get down to the main plaza and explain how today's going to go. They walked towards the stairs, and holy whoa, the USJ goes a lot deeper than you think from looking from the outside. During the long walk down, Chico-chan elbowed Izuku. Hey Midori-kun, you said something about quirk antithesis, right? I guess you meant quirks that are the complete opposite of each other. Izuku gave a quick nod, but decided to spare her the lecture as she continued. Well, if you think about it, even though both their quirk and 13's black hole are like the complete opposite with their functions, the things they're named after are exactly the same thing, just at different points in time. He mulled that over. I guess you're right, Chico-chan. Though since my fusion is extremely small scale and I constantly have the helium replaced with more hydrogen, I don't think my stomach will ever just suddenly turn into a black hole. She snickered at that. Hey, Midori-kun, imagine though if one day your quirk accidentally pulled too hard and your stomach turned into a black hole. You could be just like Kirby and eat all the food. They were about to reach the fountain marking the center of the USJ, and Izuku decided to wrap up the conversation before Aizawa-sensei silenced them again. That last bit sounds fun, but I'd rather it didn't, Shiko-chan. Izuku's assessment turned out to be correct, as Aizawa-sensei spoke up moments later. Alright class, now that we're here let's get started, only to get interrupted when the large spotlights decorating the dome started flickering on and off. Aizawa-sensei sighed as the class started panicking. I swear to God, I thought we checked the entire power grid for possible reboot glitches yesterday. He snapped to no one in particular. The class was still pretty unnerved, but 13 quickly started herding everyone to the wooded area on the right side of the large stairs. We might have overlooked the USJ since it's pretty far removed from the rest. Though this is a good opportunity to show everyone the overseer room. As they walked away from the central plaza, Izuku couldn't help but feel like something was off about the whole situation, but he shrugged it off and followed the group. They eventually got to a small door with a keypad hiding within the trees, and 13 opened it after entering a passcode. After several hallways filled with hissing pipes and messily laid down electrical cables, they entered a large room with multiple panels and monitors. 13 turned around to face them. This is what I like to call the Overseer's Chamber. You can control all the individual zones from here, as well as have full camera coverage. The emergency generators are a bit further back behind all the pipes, which is what we've come here for. She walked to them and turned them on at maximum power. I've experienced several power and security grid glitches or failures when this facility was still being tested, since it's pretty far removed from the main campus, so we decided to implement an override system for safety. Feeding enough electricity into the USJ systems with these emergency generators should override the main grids, and hopefully everything returns to normal after that. After a few tense minutes the glitching screens eventually cleared up, and everyone could see that the spotlights had stopped flickering as well. Aizawa-sensei joined 13 in front of the students. Alright everyone, that delay was irrational, but I suppose we can do the introduction in here. He gestured towards the monitors. As you can see, the USJ is made up of several different disaster zones. We'll be using these to train you for rescue work in different areas and situations. Since this is the first rescue-based lesson, we'll be taking it slow to introduce all the zones and teach you the basics. Aizawa-sensei stayed silent for a moment as everyone took in the monitors. First of all, we're going to gauge where all of you are currently at with knowledge and instincts, and go further based on that. Every zone is littered with rescue dummies, though with light injuries programmed in for now, and every student will try to rescue as many as possible for points. Further endangering or harming the dummies will detract points, of course. After that, they left 13 behind in the overseer room, and went through the central plaza, as Aizawa-sensei led them to somewhere in the mountain zone. We'll count a dummy as rescued once they're brought to this point, he supplied. Aizawa-sensei then smirked. Oh right, one more thing. Everyone will be going into each zone at the same time since I don't want to waste that much of our day here, so this will essentially be a free-for-all. The smirk somehow intensified even more. The person with the most overall points at the end will get a heads up for any logical ruse I'll pull for the rest of this year. Wah, begin. Everyone stopped yelling after that statement, until they remembered what present Mick had pulled at the entrance exam, and they all scrambled further into the mountain zone. The promise of getting spared from any future logical ruses spurring everyone to work even harder. Since Izuku's quirk wasn't very useful for locating victims, he went for the tried and true method of frantically running around while looking compassed again. With it, he was able to locate a decent amount of dummies, stuck on ledges or hidden within small alcoves, which he dropped off back at Aizawa-sensei. 13 was probably using the overseer room to closely examine each student and relay it to Aizawa-sensei. Everything went fine until he and a few others, consisting of Todoroki, Yamomo, and Aoyama, encountered a large ravine that separated them from the rest of the mountain zone. That wouldn't have been a problem, until Izuku noticed the remains of a rickety bridge hanging against the opposite cliff wall. He turned around to address the others, who were obviously experiencing the same problems. Alright guys, I know this is a free-for-all, but I think we should work together for this. Todoroki looked like he was going to object, but Izuku continued. Last I saw at the drop-off point, Jerome and Shinjai discovered a large group of dummies in a collapsed cave with their sensory quirks, and split up the points. If we want to stand any chance at getting the most points here, we'll need to create a safe, viable path to the rest of this zone, and capitalize on it. The others, including Todoroki, nodded in agreement, and Yamomo adopted a pensive pose. The fastest and easiest way would be for Todoroki-kun to make an ice bridge to the other side. They looked at Todoroki, who shook his head. While I can certainly create enough ice in the air to cross the gap, I don't have any control over it beyond the initial direction and amount. With this distance I could easily overshoot and hit the civilians standing on the other side. Besides, it wouldn't be a flat surface, so it'd be hard to traverse. He pointed towards the cliff, and Izuku noticed the somewhat hidden dummies across the gap. If I had a template to guide my ice with, I could do it much more safely though. Oh wow, I think that's the most I've heard him talk all week. Shaking off his train of thought, he turned to his vice rep. Yamomo, can you create 2 long enough ropes that we can use as a template? She gave a polite smile. Certainly, Midoriya-kun, but who will get the ropes across? Izuku paused at that observation. Crap, both Koch-chan and Cheiko-chan aren't here. I can definitely cross the gap with my new boots, but I might get the ropes tangled up if I carried both of them over at the same time, and I'd have to let go of one of them to come back for the other, if I only carried one at a time. Surprisingly, Aoyama responded and halted Izuku's train of thought. That person would be moi, of course. Eh? Well, if he thinks he can do it, I can do it as well. Yamomo, these iron souls aren't just for stronger kicks. They all agreed to the plan, and Izuku volunteered as the first to cross. He easily crossed the ravine with the directed air blasts from solar wind, like with the wall the day before. Once he safely landed on the other side with his rope, he looked back and saw Aoyama propelling himself over the ravine with his laser. Everything seemed to be going surprisingly well, until the very end, when the laser sputtered out and Aoyama started losing momentum. Izuku panicked, but luckily Aoyama was close enough for Izuku to grab him from the cliff edge and pull him up. Ah, thank you, Manami. Zuna say pa how I would have made it without you. The team didn't sound very bothered, but the slightly paler than normal skin indicated otherwise. Izuku was just relieved that nobody had been hurt, but something was already bothering him again. I'm glad you're safe, but we have to talk about how you just did that later. Aoyama-san. Aoyama's sparkles decreased with that air. Aoyama-kun. The sparkles returned in full force. Of course, Manami. Once the two ropes were secured and spread apart enough, Todoroki generated ice from his right foot, which quickly traversed both ropes, and spread out to form a thick flat bridge over the ravine. Izuku gave a thumbs up from across the bridge. That was awesome, Todoroki-san. And then promptly dashed off further into the zone. He looked over his shoulder and saw that both Yamomo and Todoroki finally realized it was a free-for-all again, and started running across the bridge. Izuku giggled at Yamomo nearly slipping several times before pausing, facepalming, and creating ice skates. That quick bout of teamwork probably gained the four of them enough points to match up to the sensory quirk students, and Izuku thought he noticed the corners of Aizawa-sensei's mouth twitching upwards behind his capture scarf when they came back with a ton of dummies each. The other disaster zones mostly went the same way, with some notable highlights being Izuku shielding himself from the rain in the downpour zone by evaporating the rain before it could touch him, and using his heat resistance to casually walk through the fire in the conflagration zone. Contrary to those two zones, Izuku had a lot of trouble in the flood zone, since any use of his quirk could evaporate a lot of the water. A small mercy though was that most people, barring Asui and Yamomo, were having trouble there. Asui didn't have any trouble, since her quirk was simply made for the water, while Yamomo surprised Izuku by creating a hull diver's suit with extra oxygen canisters for the dummies. After they finished with the flood zone, they had lunch at the central plaza, and Izuku, who was feeling a bit left out, approached Yamomo, who was gracefully stuffing her mouth with food. Hey, Yamomo, I didn't know you could make oxygen canisters. Does that mean you can make purely fluids as well? She turned to greet him, hastily wiping some food crumbs off her cheek. Hello again, Midoriya-kun. I'm afraid I don't fully understand your question. I meant if you could make liquids and gases like the oxygen, but without the canister. She nodded in understanding. I see, it's certainly possible, but I'm not sure making liquids and gases would be very useful without the canisters, since I wouldn't be able to go much over standard pressures or store it anywhere. Izuku looked down at his support items. I'm sure you could ask your support partner to make you some type of boots and gauntlets that can store and or pressurize any fluid you create with other functionalities, of course. Yamomo looked pensive, but Izuku realized something else. Actually, speaking of your support partner, why did they design your suit that way? I mean, I understand the leotard since you want bare skin, but did they have to do it that way? Like, it could have easily been shorts and an open back sports bra. Your sides and your back are pretty useful areas, your back especially for making large objects. Plus, I think making any objects from your chest would just be a hassle, since it's a pretty loose inwardly curved surface. Izuku awkwardly finished that sentence as his brain finally caught up to what body part he was talking about. Yamomo giggled. Oh Midoriya-kun, I think you got it a bit backwards. This is fully my own design. Izuku paused his mental panicking. Your support partner didn't finish it in time. She nervously started playing with her side bang. Well, apparently when it came to my quirk, the support students got a bit too competitive over who'd get assigned to me, and, well since it was over spring break, two of them started hacking and tracking down the other competitors. The one who ended up getting assigned to me is still recuperating at home from some chemical burns. Izuku mentally balked. Oh god, Yamomo, that sounds awful. Would they be fine? She started looking sad but gave a curt nod. Of course, the two perpetrators were discovered rather quickly by Principal Nezu, and were promptly expelled from UA, on the grounds of assaulting a fellow student. My parents paid for the hospital bills, plus, I added some of my own pocket money to their donation to make up for the unnecessary harm that befell her because of me. Their sad look vanished as a soft smile appeared. As for your concerns, Midoriya-kun, I tried several designs, but my sides and back are covered since they are in my blind spots, and walking around with that skin exposed would be quite dangerous when you consider incoming projectiles and the weather. Apparently, Koch-chan had been listening in while Kaminari-kun was hopelessly trying to start a conversation with him, and butted in. Boy Ponytail, from the sounds of it you're pretty damn smart, but apparently you're also pretty stupid when it comes to yourself. Do you see Edgelord over there? Koch-chan pointed his hand in the direction of the teen with the bird head mutation, Tokoyami. Just do what he's doing and use a full body cape for protection. Just load it with some damn weights to avoid it flying all over the fucking place from the wind, and make it easily removable or something, if someone decides to grab you with it. That way, you can go for whatever the fuck Zuku said before, and any large objects you make will just push the shitty cape out of the way. Koch-chan's observation was cut off as Aizawa-sensei coughed to get everyone's attention. Alright class, I know you're all tired, but we're ahead of schedule, and we'll be heading for the last zone now. Need I remind you what the reward is? Everyone wordlessly understood what he meant and rushed off immediately once they arrived at the drop-off point for the ruined zone. No starting signal needed anymore after the first 5 times. Izuku wasn't gonna lie, the ruined zone was definitely the easiest to traverse for him with his wind blasts, since there was no dome or high obstacles blocking him. He'd really have to thank Mei-chan the next time he saw her. Without the souls he would have probably caused a lot of collateral damage from the uncontrolled winds. He had been jumping straight up in the air to get a general view from above, when he saw Germ crouching on the ground below. Izuku used some blasts of solar wind, guided by the extendable mechanisms attached to his improved gloves, to guide his descent, and used a burst from his boots to softly land near her. Hey, Germ-san, are you okay? Germ was startled out of her concentrated state and screamed right into his face. The 2 jacks that were coming right for his face abruptly stopped as she realized who she was about to attack. Jesus Christ, Midoriya, I didn't hear you coming at all. She seemed embarrassed from her outburst, as she quickly composed herself and shoved his shoulder. Please warn me next time, you ass. You were way too quiet. Oh, sorry, Germ-san. Please chill and drop the honorifics, Midoriya. I'm not gonna get my feelings hurt from a missing word. Izuku quietly nodded and she huffed in annoyance. Did you actually need something, or did you just think it'd be funny to make me crap my pants? He fought the rising flush of embarrassment. Right. I just saw you from above and was wondering why you've been so concentrated for this long. Everyone else is already way further than us. She gave him a deadpan stare. I think something weird is going on in here. I think I can hear one more heartbeat than there should be in this zone. I dunno, it's kinda weak too. Huh? Are you sure it isn't 13? She's probably still in the overseer room under the stairs right next to this zone. Germ shook her head. No, it's definitely coming from somewhere in here. Shinjai had apparently noticed Izuku's descent earlier and approached it too. I can indeed confirm that there is an unknown presence in one of the nearby collapsed buildings. I think we should check it out, just in case. The 3 of them nodded, but Izuku started getting second thoughts as they approached the unknown person. Oh gosh, what if it's a villain that somehow got into UA without anyone noticing? There's a villain in here. Izuku gave an embarrassingly girly scream from the sudden noise behind him, and he quickly turned around to see it was just Chieko-chan floating slightly above the ground, probably having used her quirk on herself to safely jump down from one of the nearby buildings just now. Germ snickered in the background. That's karma for earlier, I guess. And Izuku addressed Chieko-chan, trying to forget about that embarrassing moment. Hey, Chieko-chan. We think there might be another person hiding somewhere in this zone and Izuku was cut off by Germ who was suddenly listening intently to something. Wait, I think I just heard someone groaning in the building next to us. Conversation quickly cast aside, the 4 of them cautiously entered the collapsed house and halted at the scene in front of them. A scrawny person that looked more skeleton than man with bright blonde hair had been pinned on the ground by a wooden beam and several bricks, bleeding from his side and the head. Izuku threw away any caution he might have had and rushed towards the injured person with Momot already activated. Sir, are you alright? Can you hear me? While Izuku waited for a response, he started inspecting the injuries. There was quite some bleeding from the man's left side, where the beam was pinning him to the ground from, a few bruises on his legs and left arm and blood soaking the blonde mane of hair, indicating a headwind. Izuku paused when he noticed a badge hanging around the man's, admittedly unhealthily thin, neck. The man seemed to be breathing, but his eyes were closed and he hadn't responded yet, so Izuku focused on the badge instead, and read the text beneath his picture aloud. Tiyagi, 55 years old. Senior reporter, Germ perked up. The press. Is he one of the reporters that stormed in yesterday during the blackout? How'd he even wander all the way over here and somehow get pinned under a beam? Izuku started panicking. Wait, this blood is somewhat crusted already. Does that mean he's been like this since yesterday? We have to help him out quickly. Chieko-chan was the first to come to her senses and ran up to the beam, ready to use her quirk. Izuku could immediately see that she was going to rush it. Wait, hold on. We can't just remove this beam without making sure nothing else could fall over. Izuku turned around to address the other 2 present. Shinjai-san, could you help support everything while Chieko-chan removes the rubble with her quirk? And Germ, do you have a first aid kit with you? She nodded in response. Perfect, help that man out once he's gotten unpinned while I get out and signal the others for help. Quickly leaving them behind inside the house, Izuku ran towards the middle of the street and started panicking on how to best alert his peers and the staff. Crap, not all of us have earpieces in our hero costumes. Mei-chan was totally right when she called it stupid to not have one as a standard. How am I gonna alert everyone that something's actually wrong and tell them where they need to go? Recalling what he did yesterday during the blackout, he came up with a solution. Izuku pushed his panic aside, and once again drew out some of his stored energy to speed up his heart. But this time he concentrated and focused on using all the extra magnetic field to extend it upwards as high as possible. He then drew out more energy, and a large beam of white-hot plasma shot up into the sky, funneling outwards and fizzling out right below the dome. Super move. Astro Jet. Izuku dropped his quirk, and after a few 10 seconds, silhouettes started appearing from beyond the collapsed buildings. Yamomo and Ida were the first to arrive, and Izuku addressed them immediately. Yamomo, get in that building and make a gurney if you still can. We have an injured civilian pinned by a collapsed beam in that house. Germ, Shinjai, and Yoraka are getting them out right now, and are tending to his injuries. Ida-san, run back to the drop-off zone and inform Aizawa-sensei of the situation if he isn't coming here already, after that signal I made. They both gave noises of agreement, and after a few tense minutes the stray member of the press was securely loaded onto a gurney, and being floated up the stairs towards the entrance with Cheiko-chan's quirk. Shortly after, an ambulance parked next to their bus outside the USJ and recovery girl exited from the back, closing the doors again once the gurney had been loaded onto it. As the ambulance drove off to the main campus, Aizawa-sensei turned around to look at the class, with the traces of what could possibly be described as a somewhat proud stare. I'm sure you weren't expecting to do any real rescue work today, but apparently the press is more irrational than I thought. He then addressed Izuku and the others who found the victim. You did a decent job for the first time, you four. Also, Midoriya, your leadership skills are not god-awful for a first year. Focus on that more, it's a skill not nearly enough heroes have. Even though they definitely should. He then went back to addressing the entire class. I suppose you might have forgotten about the points, and the reward. Everyone perked up from that. A creepy grin spread across his face. But there were no actual points being given out. That reward was just a logical ruse, designed to see how you act in a rescue situation under actual stress. Multiple groans, a few sighs of resigned disappointment and one anguished scream, courtesy of Kaminari-kun, came from the crowd. Ida looked especially frustrated at yet another lie, but it was all quickly forgotten as they loaded back onto the bus. Is that what it was like at the end of the apprehension test? Oh man, I'm glad I missed out on the last time now. Once the bus arrived back at the main building, Izuku was already thinking about how to spend the upcoming night when Aoyama pulled him to the side. Aoyama-kun, is there something you want to ask me? Excusez-moi, you told me you'd come back to my 0DAZZLING0 laser after the exercise. Aoyama flicked his hair with a dazzle. Izuku blinked several times before he remembered the conversation back in the mountain zone. Oh, right. Sorry, Aoyama-kun. So, I was wondering how you crossed that cliff with your laser. Aoyama smiled in response. Je voice. I use my bell light to propel myself backwards. Izuku nodded. Yeah, I got that part. It's just there's no way light could actually do what you just described. Aoyama's smile froze, but Izuku went on. Now, don't get me wrong, light does have momentum despite not having any mass, but there's no way your laser would have enough of it to propel a human body backwards by several meters in the air, if it emitted normal light, especially not on Earth. Izuku noticed Aoyama's smile falling but continued anyway. Now that I think of it, your light has some other weird things going on too. First of all, there's no way we should be able to see it moving away from you. It should be going so fast that you fire it off, and the laser should have already extended outside of our view instantaneously. It's also weirdly destructive. It pierced through like several robots during the entrance exam, which is much more physical than you'd expect light to act. When I consider all of what I just said, it almost acts more like a solid or liquid than actual light. My best guess would be some sort of plasma, but the heat that would require would have a noticeable impact on the surroundings, which just isn't there. Maybe it could be something like plasma. I'm pretty sure cold plasma is a thing, but I never really researched that. When no response came, Izuku got a bit nervous and addressed another thing he was thinking about. Also, is there a reason you're wearing that belt all the time, Aoyama-kun? Aoyama actually grimaced at that question. I was sadly born with a birth defect, and my laser occasionally leaks out, so we got this belt to contain all of it. Izuku took a double take. Did you just say leaked out, like a fluid? Not shot out. Aoyama sighed. I suppose, besides, my belt mostly does the shooting part for me. Izuku balked. With that kind of force, so you're saying that every time you fire off a laser with your belt, you experience enough physical recoil to propel yourself backwards in the air over a ravine. No wonder you get stomach aches if you overuse it. He noticed that Aoyama had started backing away, and he quickly calmed himself down. I'm sorry, Aoyama-kun. I guess I got a bit frustrated at whoever your quirk counselor was. Basically, what I want to ask you is this. Are you even sure your quirk is meant to be a naval laser? Or did everyone just assume that it's a belly button laser, instead of just something that produces that stuff, probably from capturing light, which you can then use by extracting it through your navel? Aoyama donned a similar look to the one Mirio-senpai had a few days ago, and Izuku decided to be helpful, instead of just giving people existential crises concerning their quirk, and petted his back. Aoyama-kun, I think that during our next heroics lesson you should probably take off your belt for a bit, and see if you can slowly pull out whatever it is that comes out of your navel. And if that works, you should see what you can do with it when it's not being propelled away from you at those speeds. If my hunch is incorrect, you can just forget anything I said and go back to normal, of course. Aoyama gave a curt but appreciative nod, and followed the rest of the class back to the changing rooms. Izuku followed suit shortly after. Even once he was walking back home with Koch-chan, he couldn't help but experience that weird feeling he had felt ever since the USJ lights started flickering. I don't know why, but I feel like something else was supposed to happen back then. As we know, Izuku is correct in his assessment. In the canon universe, Class 1 would have had their first encounter with real villains at the USJ that day, and the League of Villains would have made their debut to the world. But we already know this isn't that universe, and simple changes can ripple outwards and create waves that can drastically change events far off in the future. If there's already such a simple difference of a quirkless kid being born with a quirk of heroin, then who knows what else might be up in the air. In a seedy bar hidden in Yokohama, an adolescent glares at several shots with all might and a younger boy visible on his phone. A mouth, hidden under a disembodied hand, morphs into an unsettling grin as he looks at a nearby calendar, a date, not too far from now, marked off on it. The extra preparation time had been a hassle, but the perfect moment was almost within reach. The game would finally start soon. Hardening. This quirk stores the silicon the user eats in their epidermis. When this quirk is active, the silicon is drawn to the layer of dead skin cells, where it reacts with oxygen in the air to form a layer of silicates in a specific structure attached to the skin. If the user has more silicon stored, they can stack multiple layers on top of already existing layers. As the user's skin as well as their eyes can be seen beneath the hardened layers, this silicate structure is most likely see-through. Naval laser name change advised. This quirk passively takes the light from the surrounding area, which gives the user a naturally sparkling skin, and captures it within a cavity inside the user's bell, by using a special binding substance that traps the light, giving it a solid form. The user can mentally extract this solid light through their navel, but due to a birth defect the navel can leak if it builds up too much. How this solid light can be used is not known yet, but the binding substance appears to deteriorate once the solid light goes far enough away from the user, causing the light to escape and return back to normal. It's possible that this solid light can be commanded by the user to change its shape. Due to the malpractice of a quirk counselor, the user assumed their quirk was meant to shoot out the solid light at fast speeds, and was granted a support item that could contain the leaking as well as aid in the firing. The laser firing seems to impact significant forces on the user, which causes their stomach to hurt after prolonged usage. There's a chance this solid form is actually a form of cold plasma, but how this plasma would be formed from gathering light, and whether it's cold plasma, and not some as of yet unknown substance, needs to be researched further. An inquiry for further research will be sent to Island's Material Sciences Research Department. For the first time this week, Izuku felt like he finally had a regular night again, which isn't saying much since it was already the final day of the first week. It was times like these where he was glad UA was one of the Japanese schools that switched to the 5-day week not too long ago. He had no idea if he could survive 6 consecutive days at UA like this with only 1 day off. Izuku hoped that today would also be equally as uneventful as last night, but that totally depended on how the student council meeting this afternoon was going to go. The door to the classroom slid open, and Aizawa-sensei walked in with his usual "I am solely awake because of caffeine" and pure spite posture. "Alright class, I know yesterday gave you a bit of a scare, but the surprises aren't over just yet, but the chances of today being uneventful could be ruined during homeroom." "Great job, Izuku, you just had to jinx it." Aizawa-sensei either didn't notice or just didn't care about the tense mood that arose in class, and continued. "In about 2 weeks' time, UA will be holding its annual sports festival." Everyone gave a sigh of relief, and the mood was quickly replaced by joyful excitement. Aizawa-sensei was clearly not done speaking yet, given his fierce stare, and everyone stayed quiet. Izuku suspected that flashing erasure in front of everyone was Aizawa sensei's go-to method of silencing a classroom, but with Starborn's peculiar and dangerous reaction to being erased and his lack of control over which quirks are affected, Aizawa sensei was deprived of that method here. Thank you for being rational for once. As I wanted to say, this festival, despite being very close to the start of the year, will be one of the most important events during your school year. There will be a lot of pro heroes watching for potential talented youngsters to extend internships to, either from the stands or from the live broadcast. These will be a valuable but limited resource for experience, as most pros only have the capacity to take on one student at a time. The second and third years will be competing on the same day as well, so if you want to be picked over them, you'll have to give a good showing. We will use the heroics lessons in the upcoming 2 weeks to help prepare you all. That's about it, I guess. And with that, the rest of homeroom was a free session like usual, while Aizawa sensei seemed to catch up on sleep in his corner. Izuku hadn't thought about it much after Aizawa sensei used his quirk on him, due to the whole burping incident and everything else, but he finally remembered it last night, and went on one of his nightly information searching sprees, finding out that his homeroom teacher was Eraserhead. Arguably the best underground hero there was in Japan, was quite exciting. He already had so many questions about his quirk, like why his hair stood up. Excess energy from erasure. A secondary quirk that activated after a traumatic event. Or how it could even erase a quirk. Does it actually inhibit the plus alpha gene? Or does it inhibit the signal coming through the nervous system from the brain? But after the last 4 days, he decided that those questions probably wouldn't be welcomed by his homeroom teacher. The next interesting thing that day happened during lunch, because apparently lunch was the time when things decided to happen to Izuku. The Izuku, yes, the others had stubbornly stuck with the name, and though Izuku acted embarrassed whenever they said it out loud, he did secretly adore the moniker had been eating at their now regular table, and eventually got to the topic of the sports festival. Chieko-chan was the one who first brought it up, suddenly falling into an uncharacteristically intense mood. Hey guys, you ready to crush this festival cause I'm ready to show those pros what I got. She aggressively jabbed her fist into the air. Kaminari-kan nervously looked around as the surrounding tables turned towards them. Holy crap, Uraka, I think we're all excited but tone down the murder face please. It's scaring me. Koch-chan, who had been silently eating his curry, decided to tease him. Ha. Scared of a girl, picture. He turned his attention to Chieko-chan next. Seriously though, round face, didn't peg you for the murderously competitive vibe. Chieko-chan had already shown herself to be the only one besides Izuku himself that could talk back to Koch-chan in a way that wouldn't set him off, and responded with a smirk. Oh, is the mighty Koch-chan scared this girl will steal his trademark vibe? Before he could bite back at the unlicensed use of the nickname, she settled back down in her normal personality. Seriously though, I'm actually really nervous for the festival. I really need to do well here, I'm kinda counting on it, since it's a big reason I'm going to UA. Kaminari-kan responded next. I mean, I'm pretty sure we all are, Uraka, so I don't see the big deal. Like, I definitely don't want to go dunce mode and embarrass myself in front of the world on live TV. He flashed his thumbs and moved his hands back and forth for emphasis. Mei-chan, who had forgotten to get or eat lunch for at least 3 days in a row already and so was now eating from a bento box Izuku had asked his mom to prepare this morning, was the next to respond with a shrug. I'm just excited to finally show my super cute babies to the world. I definitely have a lot of tweaking, testing, and training to do with them still, so I'm gonna ask for your assistance again really soon, 0-pointer-kun. While Izuku still wasn't very pumped about the prospect of another one of those all-nighters, he remembered their promises and trusted Mei-chan to not go about it as hectic as last time. Chieko-chan was the one to start the conversation up again, and let her accent slip through, which she had apparently been hiding the past few days. To tell you guys the truth, I kinda feel like an imposter. I mean, you guys are all city folks with such heroic ambitions, and then here I am, a dirt poor country girl who's just in it for the big bucks. Izuku scooted closer next to her and reassuringly rubbed her back. I don't think it's a bad thing to have selfish motivations, Chieko-chan. I can't speak for all of us here, but I know Koch-chan wants to be a hero, because he wants to show he's the strongest and to fight strong opponents, and if I boil it down to the basics, I want to be a hero to be recognized and famous. His hand left her back and she looked at him in surprise. Honestly, I don't think heroes having selfish motivations is that bad. Selfishness is the whole reason the current pro-hero system exists, anyway. There'd be too little heroes to fight against all the villains if they weren't promised any pay as a reward. As long as those selfish motivations don't start to interfere with your ability to be a hero, I think it's totally acceptable, expected even. Chieko-chan gave a soft smile. You always know just what to say, ha, Midori-kun. I guess I can elaborate. My parents are dirt poor, so I'll want to earn enough to pay them back for their support. Izuku mulled that over, an interesting thought popping up in his mind. You know, Chieko-chan, that already doesn't sound very selfish, but if you were truly only interested in making money to provide for your parents, then you could have picked from a wide array of jobs. I don't like to think about it, but most employers favor people with strong quirks, even if those quirks aren't applicable for the job. That, and the average salary of a pro hero is pretty mediocre. You probably only get to the big payouts if you're in the top 20. He gestured to Koch-chan again. Not to repeat myself, but if Koch-chan simply wanted to fight strong opponents, he could have gone to an underground quirk fighting ring. And if I just wanted fame and recognition, I could have become an actor. But neither of us did, since beyond our selfish motivations, I know that we do want to save people. And I'm pretty sure you're the same in that regard, Chieko-chan, and that's what counts at the end. She beamed a smile that could rival Izuku's own, but it disappeared quickly when a tired, baritone voice spoke up, and Izuku could be forgiven for thinking that Aizawa-sensei had somehow manifested behind him to finally get his revenge on the burping incident. You know, when I pictured the hero course, I was already expecting the feel-good shtick, but you somehow still exceeded my expectations. Turning around, Izuku found himself facing a student with purple hair that looked like it had just survived a Category 7 tornado, and eye bags that rivaled Aizawa-sensei's. Maybe I wasn't so far off with my first guess. Izuku started getting lost in his thoughts again, but Chieko-chan saved him by speaking up in his stead, back to masking her accent. Excuse me, but did you have a reason to come up to us? The guy gave a half-hearted shrug. Not really, I was just scoping out you hero course students for the sports festival after the announcement this morning, and couldn't help but listen in. Judging from how you five decided it was your job to be heroes in a hero school and boss around the others during the blackout, I'm guessing you fancy yourselves the top of the hero course, huh? I already knew you guys were happy to look down on us commoners, but it seems you lot can't help but divide yourselves up as well. It's not often that Izuku got angry, but he definitely had to suppress a flash of anger at the insult towards his friends, and put on a strange smile. I don't know what makes you think they're like that, but I am certain that every single one of my classmates worked hard and proved themselves to be part of the hero course. The guy, who Izuku guessed Koch-chan was probably gonna call eyebags, rolled his eyes. Oh, you really are the stereotypical golden boy, huh? Hard work doesn't matter in the face of that biased entrance exam. I worked my ass off and in the end the effort wasn't even worth jack shit because of those robots, so get that naive head of yours out of your own ass. It seemed that that final comment triggered the hornet's nest, as Izuku felt palpable anger radiating from his friends. Koch-chan, predictably, was the first to speak up. Boy, eyebags called it. I don't know what kin to hot shit you think you are, walking up to us and antagonizing my friend, but either show us you're not spewing fucking garbage or go back to the trash can you came from. Chieko-chan came up next. What did Midori-kan even do to you to warrant this? Kaminari-kan followed up straight after. Dude, not cool. Everyone's watching us now. Mei-chan was the last to respond in an indignant tone. I'm not even in the hero course. Eyebags gave an unimpressed look and seemed to ignore all previous statements, instead focusing on the last one. Oh right, you hero students also get your very own support lackeys, another benefit you can lord over us peasants. Well, I'll keep it short and simple for you guys. If one of us does well enough during the sports festival, the staff will consider transferring them into the hero course, and the opposite is equally true. The tired, indifferent look in his eyes was suddenly replaced by a dangerous glint as he stared down their table. So consider this a declaration of war. Watch yourselves, hero course, cause if you don't, I'll be taking away one of your spots right from under you. Despite the previous comments, Koch-chan seemed to give a small grunt of respect for the confidence, but Izuku's mind had already latched onto something by that point, and he couldn't stop himself from voicing his confusion, right before eyebags could turn around and walk away. That doesn't make any sense though. Eyebags halted mid-turn and faced him again with an incredulous look lifted straight off of Aizawa-sensei's face. If I remember this correctly, there's no reason why the hero classes are capped at 20 students each beyond, just for convenience's sake. It'd be especially weird for UA to Our class definitely has room for another row of desks in the back, so I don't see why you couldn't be student 21 in the future. Izuku finished up his quick ramble with a bright smile. If you're confident in yourself and you've worked hard for it, then I look forward to seeing you in our class. And I hope I'll get to personally introduce you to everyone in one when you do. Eyebags looked bewildered for a few seconds, but suddenly snapped out of it and promptly turned around. Izuku could see a hint of something in his eyes as he did. He spoke up one final time as he left, but it sounded less confident than his previous declaration. The name's Shinzum, so you better remember it for when I walk through that door. When Shinzum finally left their view and the other cafeteria goers went back to their own lunch, Koch-chan started cackling. Oh my fucking god, Zuku, you completely trashed the troll doll in front of everyone. Man, I knew you could be a sassy little shit, but he broke down again in another fit. Koch-chan wasn't able to finish his sentence, and Izuku looked at his friends in confusion. Hey, did I do something wrong, you guys? Izuku pouted at the weird looks they were giving. I was just giving him some nice words of encouragement. Chieko-chan and Kaminari-kun's faces turned red from holding in laughter, and in the background Koch-chan's cackling devolved into a belly laugh, which attracted attention from nearby students again, when it was suddenly interrupted as he choked on some of his curry, and Mei-chan proceeded to perform a scarily efficient and nonchalant Heimlich maneuver. How many times has she needed to do that to get so proficient at it? A strange encounter at lunch was quickly pushed to the back of his mind as the remaining classes went by, and eventually Izuku found himself walking with Yamomo to classroom 1J of the management department, where Principal Nezu had said the council meeting would take place through a curt but polite email. The walk was pretty long since, unlike the support and gen ed departments, the management department was in the tower that wasn't adjacent to the hero course one. When they got out of the hero course section and waved goodbye to their classmates, Yamomo spoke up. Midoriya-kun, I was recently told something about the sports festival that I think you might find useful. Oh, well, I'd love to know, of course. Izuku was just glad that the walk wasn't going to be filled with awkward silence, since he had no idea what to talk about. Aizawa-sensei told me that the first year that scores the highest in the hero course entrance exam is going to give the opening speech and student pledge, as the first year representative. Izuku pictured the crowds intently listening in on one student and shivered. Oh wow, I feel sorry for whoever has to wait, I'm the one that placed first. Several heads in the hallway turned at his sudden outburst, and Izuku hunched in on himself, while his head was doing the impression of a strawberry. I mean, not to sound like I'm bragging, of course. Everyone who passed the exam did their best. Yamomo giggled and gave him a consolatory pat on the back. I don't think there's any way you could make yourself sound like you're bragging, Midoriya-kun. His head turned back to a normal shade, and he tried to find a way to steer the conversation away from that embarrassing outburst. Wait a second, would Aizawa-sensei tell you about it, and not me? Yamomo adopted an amused look and answered. He said it was going to be a logical ruse for you. Something about testing speech improvisation under significant pressure, and that it'd be on you anyway, if you didn't realize that the first placer always does the opening speech during prior festivals. Apparently Izuku not being fully satisfied with that answer showed on his face, as Yamomo continued. Oh, I guess you didn't notice me get pulled aside by Aizawa-sensei at the end of the rescue exercise yesterday. Apparently the reward of knowing my future logical ruses was a logical ruse thing was in and of itself a logical ruse. Eh? Why? Hold on, now I'm getting confused. How much does Aizawa-sensei love his logical ruses? He said it was to avoid our classmates constantly crowding me for answers and ruining his teaching style. Ah, well, at least it was reasonable. Thanks for the heads up, Yamomo. Wait, so does that mean you got the most rescue points then? The proud look that showed up in her eyes already answered that question. Yes, I just about beat out German Shinjai. Your impromptu plan at the mountain zone, as well as my help with that lone reporter at the end, was enough to get me first place. Oh also, you placed just below them at 4th place, for the same reasons I assume, so I think congratulations are in order. That's great, Yamomo. I'm really happy for you, just don't forget about me when Aizawa-sensei tries to screw me over with one of his ruses again. He chuckled nervously. She suddenly paused her walk, and Izuku looked around in confusion, only to spot the bright red 1J on the door he was about to walk past. Oh, we're here already. Ladies first. She gave one final giggle before they headed in. I see you were raised a gentleman, Midoriya-kun. Upon entering, Izuku noticed that the 1J classroom looked much like the 1A classroom, except it was clear that the desks had been neatly rearranged for a meeting. The management students seemed to have gone for a traditional U-shape, with the teacher's podium and desk standing at the open end. Several student reps were already present and casually talking with one another. Approaching the desks, Izuku noticed nameplates neatly placed on top of them. Hey, how'd they know all our names already? He then noticed a small ink paw print next to the names. Oh, I guess it was Nezu then. As he and Yamomo made their way past each desk, looking for their names, they got glares from who seemed to be the 1C reps, but eventually found their places at one of the ends of the U, and set down their bags before looking around the room more carefully. Yamomo apparently spotted someone across the room and walked over to them. Izuku quickly followed suit since he didn't recognize anyone besides Yamomo, and they had a little while before the starting time Nezu had given them. As they reached the other side of the room, Izuku noticed the person Yamomo was walking to. At first he thought she noticed her because the girl in question looked like she had the same eye and hair color as her, with her hair being much shorter and in a ponytail that split in two halfway down, both sides of which miraculously stayed up in the air. Is it a quirk, a vestigial effect, or just hair gel? But he then noticed the tightly wrapped bandages poking out from under her sleeves and a few on her exposed legs, thanks to the female outfit skirts. Oh, is she Yamomo's support partner? It's good to see that you're doing well enough to come to school. Totowai Jindeki-san. Yamomo greeted her, confirming Izuku's hunch. The now-named Jindeki turned around and greeted them with an eager smile. Oh, hello, you must be Momoyo Irozu. She extended her hand, which Yamomo took for a polite shake. It's nice to finally meet the girl I landed in the hospital for, no hard feelings by the by. I'm the 1G class rep, call me Warashi if you'd like. You practically bought permission with that pocket money of yours. She winked at Yamomo and turned her gaze at Izuku, while cocking her head to the side, the two floating ends of her split ponytail bobbing slightly from the motion. And if I remember right, you're Midoriya, huh? I hope you got yourself a support partner. A quirk was a bit too much for me and my peers, and apparently one hero course student didn't get any volunteers, despite them having a really good quirk. Izuku put his hands in front of him after hearing her apologetic tone. No, it's alright, someone really wanted me in the end. I'm pretty happy with how things turned out. He cleared his throat. Anyway, I guess it's not really necessary, but my name's Izuku Midoriya, class rep of 1A. I heard from Yamomo that you got assaulted during spring break. Did you have a reason for wanting to be her support partner? She blew a stray lock of her hair away from her eye. Yoroza wasn't my first choice. Ironically, I think it was gonna be one of the two that assaulted me. PFFT, serves them right. I'm really into chemistry, so I wanted the Ashido girl, but someone else got to her first. Hideki held her hands up to the sides of her face, palms facing him. You see, my quirk is called extraction. It's practically a chemist's wet dream. I can separate components from any mixture. Solid, liquid, gas, you name it, so long as I know the thing I want to isolate. All I have to do is touch it with one hand, and the pure compound pops right out the other. Fluids even come packaged in a handy-dandy membrane to avoid spills, which I'm very happy for. Izuku was already raring to get into quirk ramble, but Yamomo piped up. Jindeki-san, I was wondering if you might know why the 1C reps have been glaring at us several times already. I don't think I've seen them before, so I'm not sure what we might have done to warrant it. Jindeki paused and looked over their shoulders at the girl with chest-length light brown hair, and the guy with brown hair and a strong jawline, who both scoffed and looked away. I'm not sure, but it's probably cause they're in Gen Ed. Unlike the other courses, a good portion of Gen Ed are there because they failed to get into the hero course, so they might just have a chip on their shoulders. Yamomo didn't seem fully satisfied, but Jindeki moved on with the conversation. Oh, I almost forgot. She turned to the guy with dark blonde hair slicked to the side next to her. This guy's my vice. Kikungu, try and introduce yourself for once. In the meantime, if Izuku hadn't been facing towards the door while talking to Jindeki, he wouldn't have faulted himself for missing someone else quietly entering. The guy was clutching his suitcase right up to his chest, and was silently jittering all the way to the 1F rep desk, where he sat down in a hunched posture. Hey, that short black curly hair and the freckles, kinda make him look like you know, now that I think about it, he actually kinda looked like you. Izuku got tired of all the introductions, so he left Yamomo and Jindeki behind to approach his lookalike. He probably should have remembered what happened the last time he did this with Germ, as he tapped the lookalike's shoulder and spoke up. Hey, I was wondering if you were Koch-chan's. Several loose papers that had previously been in the suitcase went flying in the air, as the poor guy practically jumped out of his chair. Support partner, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for startling you. Are you alright? The lookalike panically grabbed the papers out of the air and shakily turned around. Oh, hello, my name is Mikumo Akutani. I'm the class 1F rep. How in the world did he end becoming rep? I hope it wasn't his classmates pranking him or something. Izuku flashed a bright smile. It's nice to meet you, Akutani-san. I'm Izuku Midoriya from 1A. Sorry, I didn't hear your question before. Oh yeah, I was asking if you are Kakbakum's support partner. He quickly corrected himself for the use of Koch-chan's nickname. Yeah, that's me. Oh wow, I saw Koch-chan's modified costume. It was amazing. You must be really smart. Akutani shrank in on himself, and Izuku realized he was probably getting a bit too overwhelming, so he calmed himself back down. No, really, I'm a really big quirk nerd, and I've been friends with Koch-chan for most of my life, and I never even thought of his quirk having a safety trigger mechanism that could be replicated. And you did on your first go. Akutani hid his mouth behind his briefcase, but Izuku could see the embarrassed blush. Thank you. Akutani awkwardly went back to shuffling around the loose papers, and Izuku looked around the room again to see that almost everyone had made it, except the 1B rep-san. Hey, Akutani-san, where's your vice rep? The desk next to you doesn't have a nameplate, so I was just wondering. Akutani's eyes darted towards the empty desk and blanched. My classmates didn't really want to bother with this, so they just all pointed at me and left it at that. Izuku pursed his lips from that revelation, so my hunch was right. The homeroom teacher didn't even intervene. That's not very nice of them, Akutani-san. Are you sure you can handle this on your own? I might be able to ask one of my classmates to help you if you'd like that. They're very passionate about this stuff, but they would be a great help. His lookalike paused and looked at Izuku like he had grown a second head. There's no need, I'll be fine. My classmates probably think I can do it because Principal Nezu wanted me as his. Oh my god, we're so sorry for being late. Akutani threw his papers in the air again as the door to the classroom slammed open, and a girl with orange hair and a sideways ponytail ran in, accompanied by a chubbier guy with ice blue hair, panting as they sat down at the 1B desks. The 1C rep huffed in disdain. Typical hero course, showing they're better than us by arriving last and holding everyone else up. The ginger, who sat down at the 1B rep desk, ignored the comment and spoke up. Once again, sorry for being late, guys. I'm normally always on time, but there was an incident between one of my classmates and one from one end of the hallway that I had to break up before coming here. Izuku and Yamomo made it back to their desks and sat down next to the late arrivals. As the 1C rep, I wonder if Shinzum is in the same class as her, with the matching attitudes commented again. Oh, so you guys are in fighting now too? And you're supposed to represent our school. She scoffed. Izuku saw the ginger give an annoyed look, which quickly settled back to a more neutral face, as she extended her arm. She somehow seems composed, probably used to handling jerks then. I guess we had some bad first impressions, so let's start over. My name is Itsuka Kendo, I'm the 1B rep, and this is Niranjeki Shida, my vice. Before the 1C rep could reply and probably escalate things again, they got interrupted by the sound of a chair sliding back, and everyone looked towards the teacher's desk to see a teen with slick back, dark green, bordering on black, hair with a singular tuft sticking out the front stand up with a tablet in hand, and adjust his glasses. I'm glad to see everyone has made it. I hope you don't mind, but me and the other management reps thought it'd be more fair to implement a rotation for which class is in charge for each meeting. Izuku looked around to see everyone nodding, or shrugging apathetically in a few cases. Judging from the nameplates, the reps and vice reps were sitting in a specific order. Starting at Izuku and Yamomo's end, there were 4 desks for the 2 hero classes, followed by 6 desks for Gen Ed, and 6 for support, with 4 more desks on the opposite end of the U for management, with the reps of 1J, the classroom they were in, standing at the teacher's desk instead. Deciding that it probably wasn't a great idea to let his attention wander much longer, he tuned back into the 1J rep just in time for his introduction. Now, with that out of the way, my name is Meko Sakewa, the representative of Management Class 1J. For transparency's sake, I think it's necessary to inform you of my quirk before we start. My quirk is called Spoiler Alert. It's a mixture of a predictive analysis and minor mind-reading ability, which allows me to know exactly what anyone is going to say if I hear the start of a sentence, even if they're eventually interrupted from completing it. I can't turn it off, but you have my word that if you were accidentally going to slip sensitive information, it won't be revealed by me. Oh wow, that's a really cool quirk. I don't want to delay this meeting much longer though, so let's begin. Is there anything that needs to be discussed first? Ken immediately raised her hand, and spoke up after Sakewa gave a nod. Well, I know we're all thinking about the upcoming sports festival in 2 weeks' time. Izuku could practically feel the 1C rep rolling her eyes. Yeah, right, maybe you and your wanna buddies are, but the rest of us aren't really looking forward to a mandatory event that only caters to the hero course. I personally never tried out for it, but I know several people here in Gen Ed who were wronged by that biased entrance exam, and are looking forward to having to spectate those that succeeded, while they know they don't have a chance of ever getting in. Ken turned her head and probably glared at her. Excuse me, I don't know why you feel the need to antagonize us when we haven't even done anything to warrant. As Ken went on to berate the 1C rep, Izuku frowned as he mentally pulled out one of his interesting, but probably not useful facts, much earlier than he had expected, and intervened before the meeting could devolve into a shouting match, abruptly standing up from his chair. Wait, hold on. Isn't it UA protocol that any student who performs well during the sports festival is allowed to transfer into the hero course? Izuku squirmed a bit as the 1C rep's glare switched to him, and he slowly sat back down. So Shinzum wasn't just talking out of his ass, huh? Doesn't matter though, it just sounds like it's put in there to appease the Gen Ed students that want to get in the hero course. I don't even remember a Gen Ed student ever making it to the 3rd round anyway. Her vice gave a grunt of agreement. Despite the rebuttal, Izuku wasn't ready to let it go just yet, and argued back. Well, yeah, the entrance exam is pretty biased, and some people with great quirks fall through because of the robots. But I think the main reason Gen Ed students don't get far enough in the sports festival is because they don't get any help or advantages. Hero students get supervised quirk and combat training and free access to training grounds, while support students are allowed to use their own inventions. Yamomo whispered into his ear. You aren't really helping your case right now, Midoriya-kun. Did you have a solution in mind when you stood up? He gulped but continued. Anyway, what I think needs to happen is for the 4 departments to work together to give the Gen Ed students as many advantages as possible to make it more fair. The 1C rep retorted again. I guess I'll introduce myself before arguing further with you, Wanna rep. Oh, oops, I forgot to introduce myself after my outburst. The name's Miura Kingaku, and I was chosen by my classmates because I promised them that I wouldn't let the other departments, and especially not the hero course, overshadow us like in previous years. So excuse me if I'm not jumping on the opportunity to accept the help of other departments. Ken spoke up in Izuku's stead. Well, it's just like you said earlier, there haven't really been any Gen Ed students in the final round of the sports festival, so if nothing changes, then this year isn't going to be any different for your class, which doesn't sound that great on your part. Does it really matter where you get the assistance from if it helps you out in the end? The Kingaku leaned back in her chair but didn't say anything, so Izuku took that as a sign to speak up again. So anyway, my name's Izuku Midoriya, sorry for the outburst at the start. What I was thinking is that there are probably a few Gen Ed students that would want to use the sports festival to transfer into the hero course, and I think the other 3 departments should work together to give those students as high of a chance to transfer in. For example, the hero students could help them catch up on quirk and combat training in the next 2 weeks, and before he could continue, he got interrupted by Rukingaku again. Nope, not gonna happen. Look, I personally don't really care if others know about my quirk. I can tell exactly where any person or camera is observing me from, if I don't notice them visually, but I know some of my classmates want to keep their quirk secret for an advantage during the festival. I don't see why I, or they, should trust hero students to not use that information to curb stomp them instead. Some of you hero students might be too naive to think it, but I'm convinced some of your classmates would give it a try. Izuku gulped as he thought about Koch-chan. Well, I guess she has a point there. The 1D rep, who also had light brown hair that instead reached her shoulder and seemed like she had been absently staring into space with her red dots floating inside void-like eyes since the start, suddenly spoke up in a sophisticated voice. I, Kisasuke Kuri, also from Gen Ed, currently find myself on the fence regarding Midoriya-san's proposal. I share my reservations with Rukingaku-san, as my quirk, Deja Vu, has a notable weakness that could be exploited if it were public knowledge. I will acknowledge, however, that aid could be crucial for a higher chance of success in general, and would feel like this could be a wasted chance if it were not chosen. Apparently the remaining Gen Ed rep, a more childish-looking girl with brown hair put up in 2 bushy pigtails and a large red bow adorning top, decided to speak up as well. Come on you guys, stop being the fun police. The name's Matcha Shixino from 1E, but everyone calls me Matcha, and I think it'd be really fun to change things up for once. I think my quirk is pretty cute. I can move 10 separate objects towards and away from me like super cool, big yo-yos. She proceeded to pout. But those robot meanies were way heavier than people, so my quirk couldn't do anything to them. I'd love to get some help and see how far I can get during the festival. The 1K rep, a guy who had his dark blonde hair and an impressively large hairdo, who had been in a pensive pose for the past few minutes, opened his eyes. I think letting Midoriya finish explaining his idea first before debating it would be the best course of action. One of the remaining reps that hadn't spoken up yet, a girl with chin-length grayish-purple hair, and 2 small, lighter-colored cowlicks sticking out at the front weight, is that the student I almost hit with my iron souls in the 1H studio 2 days ago. Does she recognize me? Does she hate me now? Decided to speak up as well. It has been approximately 68.349 seconds since Midoriya was interrupted again, and I'd like to hear him out as well, if that isn't too much of a hassle. Tsukewa nodded from behind the teacher's desk, and motioned for Izuku to continue. Alright. So, what I was thinking is that the other departments can help out the Gen Ed students that are trying to transfer into the hero course. The hero students could help catch them up on combat and quirk training. I also know that not every support student is fit enough to compete and show their inventions on their own, so they could at least supply the Gen Ed students with non-combative quirks with their inventions for publicity. And lastly, the management students could help market the Gen Ed students on social media for further exposure. With all the pro heroes in the actual stadium, as well as the live broadcast, the hero students don't need that extra coverage. Tsukewa had busily been typing on his tablet behind the teacher's desk since Izuku first started talking, and readjusted his glasses. Alright then, now, are there any objections? Perhaps predictably at this point, Rukingaku put up her hand. Like I said before, I still don't trust the hero students with assisting in quirk training, while not making use of the information themselves. Izuku fumbled a bit, but as his gaze fell on Akatani, who had been looking down at his desk for most of the meeting, he got a solution. Yeah, I do agree with you on that risk, which is why I think you could go to an independent party for possible quirk analysis and individual training suggestions instead, like Akatani-san, for example. Satine jerked up and gave Izuku a panicked look. What, me? Despite the distraught reaction, Izuku kept talking. He's the support partner assigned to my childhood friend, and I can assure you that he's really good at analyzing quirk based on what I saw. Everyone's gaze fell on Akatani, who squirmed under the attention, but still managed to squeeze out some words. I mean, if they send me some C-clips of their quirks, I could try my best. At that, Rukingaku seemed to give a begrudging grunt of acknowledgement, and leaned back in her chair, the debate firmly closed from her side. The next one with an objection turned out to be the one rep that hadn't spoken at all yet. The guy from 1I, who straight up looked like a gender-bent germ with swirly cheek marks, surprised everyone when he started talking fast enough to put Izuku's quirk rambles to shame, while somehow being fully understandable all the way through. There's one hole that needs to be ironed out before this plan is solid. I've given the guidelines an in-depth look as well, and according to the sports festival rules, other students are only allowed to use support equipment, licensed or from the support course, if the principal signs off on it beforehand. While Principal Nezu has sent all of us an email to organize this first meeting, I've heard from our senpais that it's notoriously difficult to reach out to him, something about a maze from hell, and answering these riddles. I didn't quite understand that part. Holy whoa, I can totally see why he kept quiet for the entire meeting. I feel worn out from listening to him already. Then, to everyone's surprise, Akatani raised a trembling hand. I think I could help with that as well. He started fiddling with his thumbs when the others looked towards him again. Before the start of the year, Principal Nezu asked me to be his personal student. I have several private lessons with him every week outside of regular lessons. Hideki leaned over the empty chair between them and gave Akatani's shoulder a playful shove. Hey, how come you never told me before? That's awesome, Mikumo. Midoriya must be right then. You have to have a pretty impressive brain in there to impress Nezu of all people. Akatani pressed his suitcase up to his face again, probably hiding a blush. Thank you, Oroshi-chan. Sukewa spoke up. Well then, that seems to take care of everything for now. Does everyone here agree to implementing Midoriya's plan during the upcoming 2 weeks? Izuku felt vindicated as every hand in the room rose up, including Rukingaku's, albeit more reluctantly than the others. Shikino whooped and made one final comment. This is gonna be really fun, you guys. I can feel it in my fingerbones. Sukewa wrote some things down on his tablet and looked back up. Now, on to the next thing. According to UA's guidelines, we are permitted to plan 1 excursion per department every term. So, with that, the meeting went on in a much less nerve-inducing way, and they quickly found themselves wrapping it up. As everyone started leaving, Izuku walked up to Akatani, who had just finished packing his suitcase. Holy whoa, Akatani-san. I guess that's what you wanted to tell me before the meeting started, right? Koch-chan was right when he called you a giant quirk nerd then. I was wondering though, since most of the others mentioned theirs, I'd love to know what your quirk. Hahaha, I am here for a surprise visit. Izuku didn't get to finish his question, as Akatani completely shriveled up at the voice. Wait, that voice is. Izuku turned away from Akatani, who had turned back to his desk, and couldn't believe his eyes when All Might himself was proudly standing in the doorway, scanning the remaining students, who had all turned to look at him. Izuku barely missed it, but he thought he saw something flash through All Might's eyes, as his gaze fell on Akatani, which disappeared as quickly as it came when his fierce blue eyes focused on Izuku of all people instead. Ah, Midoriya SHLNEN, Aizawa-kan told me you'd be here. I was hoping to have a private conversation with you before you go home, if that's alright with you. Nobody could turn down an invitation to a private conversation with All Might himself, of course, so Izuku followed him away from Akatani and the other remaining students, until they entered a cozy-looking lounge room. Izuku eagerly sat down on one of the couches as All Might carefully sat down at the other, the couch in question creaking under all the pounds of pure muscle. After an awkward impromptu staring contest, All Might began talking. Right, you're probably wondering why I asked to talk with you. Are you alright? You haven't blinked yet since we SAT down. Upon hearing that observation, Izuku blinked and winced at the dry eyes. Sorry, All Might, I just honestly can't believe that you're actually here at UA. I know I saw you on the acceptance video, and my classmates told me you brought me to the nurse's office on the first day, but I was starting to think it was just a big prank, and you weren't actually teaching here. All Might, holy crap, it's really All Might awkwardly scratched the back of his head, as Izuku's mind screeched into the void. Well, that is entirely my fault, Midoriya SHLNEN. I did not exactly properly prepare myself for the job, and I am currently attending a teaching crash course designed by Nezu, but I should be ready to get in front of the classroom once the sports festival has come and gone. Though I have asked Aizawa-kan to observe several lessons to get myself acquainted with you students in the meantime. Izuku got confused. But I haven't seen you in either of the 2 heroics lessons we've had so far. The myth himself tilted his head back and laughed his trademark laugh. You definitely wouldn't have recognized me, but that reminds me. I do have something I need to show you before I continue our talk. All Might's signature smile faded a bit as the mood got more serious. Promise me you won't scream too loudly. Why would I do that? All Izuku was saying as the room was suddenly filled with white smoke. He coughed and waved away some of the smoke, hoping there weren't any fire alarms in the lounge, until it eventually dispersed, and he noticed the scrawny, blonde-haired skeleton on the other kuaya. The stray reporter, how what? Do you have a transformation quirk? Is that how you were able to stay on campus this entire time? What did you do to All Might, you imposter? The scrawny skeleton, Yagi, if that badge was right, placatingly waved his arms around. Hold on, Midoriya-shinen. It's really me, All Might. That reporter act was just the way Aizawa decided I would observe that lesson. He said it would be a logical ruse. Izuku finished in a disbelieving tone, but was internally despairing. Holy crap, how much does Aizawa-sensei love ruses? Yeah, Momo, please save me in the future. Izuku calmed back down, but several questions were already floating around his brain. I still don't really understand. Why do you look like that, All Might? And were those injuries yesterday? The man's electric blue eyes focused on him intently. Please call me Yagi when I'm like this, my boy. As for your questions, they're both related to what I wanted to talk to you about. Most of my injuries yesterday were faked except. All Miyagi's voice trailed off as he lifted the hem of his shirt, revealing a grotesque web of scarring on his left side. Before Izuku could break out of his shock, All Miyagi continued. Pretty gross, huh? I got this injury about 6 years ago. Right now I can only be in my hero form for about 3 hours a day because of it, but it was worth it in the end. I do hope you understand that you should keep whatever we talk about in this room secret. Izuku bobbed his head up and down alarmingly quickly for someone who had a regular neck. Before I tell you more, I have to confirm one thing with you. You were kidnapped 6 years ago, right? Izuku's mind stuttered at the sudden question. Yes. How do you know that? All Miyagi, screw it, now's not the time. All Might's face turned sullen. Because I was involved in that case, my boy, though not directly. It's where I got this injury from. Izuku was still speechless as the man continued. I didn't even know I was involved in it until I saw your final attack during the entrance exam. It reminded me of back then, and I asked my friend in the police force to look into it. Once he confirmed my suspicions, I decided I wanted to talk to you, as I think I owe you an explanation for what happened to you that night, especially since you inadvertently were instrumental towards my victory against my nemesis. All Might bumped his own chest for extra effect. Izuku blanched. Your nemesis. But you've never had one. Nobody's strong enough to rival you. All Might chuckled. If you haven't heard from him, that means everything was kept under wraps as intended. But do not fret, I finally managed to defeat him back then, though not without gaining this injury from him first. Wait, but you shouldn't be thanking me then. It's my fault you got injured. All Might gave an amused but fond look. There's nothing to apologize for, my boy. If I had to choose between ending that monster of a villain and being completely healthy again, I'd choose the former every single time. All Might walked to the coffee machine and dispensed some hot chocolate before sitting back down at the table. Have some hot cocoa, my boy. This is gonna be quite the story. Izuku grabbed and blew at the steaming cocoa, settling down as All Might spoke up, not wanting to break it to him that he really couldn't drink the beverage without puking it back up immediately. It was about 6 years ago that I was chasing down an important lad in the warehouse district of Miyazaki. Toshinori Yagi, #1 hero and symbol of peace. All Might was tense as he covertly navigated the abandoned Miyazaki warehouse district. Well, as covertly as a wall of muscle could anyway, but he didn't pay as much attention as he probably should have, as he was deep in thought. I am grateful for Clock's detective work and bravery. Without his constant attempts at taking over Clock, we never could have gotten this far. Without it, we could have never narrowed it down to this district. Now all that stands between me and my final fight against All for One is a few empty warehouses. Your greed will be your downfall, All for One. He clenched his fists. I promise that tonight I will finish what you started in honor. I will bring justice to the monster that murdered you and our predecessors amongst countless others. Toshinori was startled out of his internal monologue when an explosion of extreme light and heat erupted from one of the district's central warehouses, but he wasn't fully paying attention anymore at that point as, All Might, I'm counting on you. Sensei, thank you for such wonderful comedy. He forced himself back into reality and leapt directly towards the dimming light, landing on the remains of a warehouse floor at the center of a giant crater. I see you're still using the same tricks, All for One. Have you gotten stale with old age? Toshinori expected a surprise attack or a clever retort, but was instead faced with the most surprising scene in his entire hero career so far. Somewhere to his left, on another circular-shaped area of the remaining warehouse floor, a bald, stubby old man in a lab coat was lying unconscious on the ground. Somewhere further away, he could hear another person running away behind the rubble with quick footsteps, but he ignored both of them, as the ageless monster himself stood in front of him, clutching his wrist in pain. Years of brutal training by Gran Torino should have taught Toshinori to take advantage of any weakness, but he was just taken too off-kilter by the scene. All for One quickly compassed himself when he heard the loud voice, and in the corner of his eye, Toshinori could see the stubby old man's unconscious body sinking through a purple fog and disappearing. All Might, such annoying timing, how typical of you. You know, normally I would have had my associate teleport me away so I can face you in a more suitable situation. But since a brat just put me in a terrible mood, I think killing you and ending my little brother's pesky line of mindless fools right here, right now, will be just what I need to make myself feel better. Toshinori sensed that he would probably only be able to retort one more time, before the most important fight of his life would begin. You will regret deciding to fight me tonight, All for One. As you said. This will end right here, right now. A sinister chuckle came from the symbol of evil. Your comebacks have improved since I murdered that pathetic woman you call your sensei. She was such a blemish on a moniker I used myself, as well as on my brother's Quirk and legacy. I suppose I will just have to beat those comebacks right out of you. And with that, the two giants clashed their fists for the first time of many that night, as a small, scared child ran away from Ground Zero, eventually getting found and picked up by the local police force, not getting to know the truth behind his kidnapping until many years later. equals 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 equals. In the multiverse, some elements change drastically from such small changes, while others seem to remain constant, no matter what happens. In this universe, the fight proceeds much the same way as in canon, despite the different circumstances. With All Might receiving his devastating injury, followed by All For One getting his head caved in by All Might's desperate final attack. And just like in canon, Kurogiri warps his master's body to a safe location when All Might isn't looking, instead assuming the body was destroyed by the rubble. But in this universe, All For One's personal doctor was too obsessed with the quirk he had once diagnosed himself to not see his master's latest acquisition up close. This resulted in him getting caught in the resulting supernova blast, rendering him unconscious for a short while despite his master having shielded both of them at the last second. Though he was warped to safety as well, he wouldn't regain consciousness for several more minutes after the fight had concluded. Now the question remains, how crucial were those few minutes to the timeline, or do some things just seem to remain constant? So that's quite a few Aksa. Don't worry though, they're only really there to fill in the empty wasteland outside the hero course. They might get some interactions later on, but nothing too important. If I find the need for an Ox somewhere else, then I'll try to use one I've already shown before if possible. Now then, I'm not gonna repeat that bland block of text like with the Hatsume Ox, so Hem channels inner present mic. You lot know about the hero reps already, so let's get right into the other guys and gals. First up from General Education Class 1C, it's Miura Kingaku. Her quirk, scopisthesia, allows her to know exactly where any person or camera is observing her from as long as she doesn't notice them visually. Normal people seem to have this to a degree as well, but she can really go plus ultra, yeah. Next up it's the 1D rep, Kisu Tsukikuri. Don't let her creepy eyes fool you. They have to do with her quirk, Deja Vu, which she has asked me not to talk any more about right now. How mysterious. And for the last of General Education, it's Machish Xeno from 1E. With her quirk, Yo-Yo, she can turn 10 separate objects into her own yo-yos. Being able to move them directly towards and away from herself at her own discretion. This girl is here to have some fun and I'm all for it. Opening up the support department, it's Makumo Akatani from 1F. I'm sure some of you have seen this guy already, but don't let his skittish demeanor fool you. He's made it all the way to UA, and has gotten the attention of Principal Nezu himself without any visible quirk usage, so keep an eye out for him folks. After him comes the cheerful Warashi Jindeki from 1G. She's a real help in the lab thanks to her extraction. She can isolate any compound from any mixture. Solids, liquids or gases as long as she knows what exactly the compound is. Her quirk even gift traps the fluids in a bubble for her, Nido. Wrapping up the support department, coming from 1H it's Rumir Hakatai. This is a real by the numbers girl folks. With her eyeballer she can know the value of any observable quantity, as long as it has an established unit system. The only limit to her preciseness is her own concentration, and the Heisenberg uncertainty show what does this mean. Anyway, let's not forget the management department listeners. From 1I it's the professional mumbler himself. Teritsubai. Motormouth does what it says on the tin. He can just keep talking at insane speeds, and everyone that's listening knows exactly what he wants to communicate anyway. That's crazy yo. We're getting there folks. Next comes Meiko Sakewa from 1J. Thanks to spoiler alert, he will instantly know what you're going to say if he hears you start a sentence. He'll even know what you wanted to say if you change your mind or get cut off halfway through, so better think carefully before you speak up, you dig. And to round up this roster of reps it's Makyu Kangiki from 1K. If you're wondering why he always has the best ideas and insights, then wonder no further. His quirk, Freethinker, allows him to detach his mind from the situation, giving him a unique outsider's perspective. If you and your friend are stuck in a vicious debate and you want the most unbiased answer, then check this guy out. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to me, and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-ifs coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination. Goodbye everyone.